No? Test? Okay. I'd like to go ahead and get started, if everybody's okay with that. I'd like to go ahead and call the
Recording
meeting
in
to order.
progress.
I'd like to ask everybody to please silence their phones and beepers if they have any. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or advance the application to proceed to the city commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to resolution number 2021-118, the city of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments virtually. For those members of the public who are appearing on Zoom and wish to testify, actually, you do not have to be, since it's a legislative, you do not have to be visible and be sworn in. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to the city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board special meeting on Mediterranean standards of September 26, 2024 to order. The time is 4:02. Jill, if you please call the roll.
Robert Behar.
Here.
Julio Gabriel asked to be excused. Sue Karolinski. Here. Felix Pardo.
Here.
Javier Salman also requested to be excused. Chip Withers.
Here.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Here. We will not have swearing in today as the item is legislative, as I had stated before. Everyone who speaks today must complete the roster on the podium. We ask that you print your name clearly so the official records of your name and address will be correct. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda or this afternoon's agenda item to please open your chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants will then follow after Zoom participants are done. I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item as well, and I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Procedure we'll use tonight is first the identification of agenda item by Mr. Caller. Actually, it'll be Madam City Attorney. Mr. Caller is not here. Presentation by staff, and I'll go ahead and open it for public comment, first in chambers, then in the Zoom platform and phone line platform. I'll go ahead and close public comment. We'll have board discussion. Then if there's a motion, discussion, and second of a motion, if applicable, the board's final comments, and a vote. Before we start, in light of not having a full board on this item, which is such an important issue, I would like the board's input on a few options. 1, we can go ahead, defer to reschedule the meeting. 2, we can proceed with the meeting and see if there is a recommendation and a vote. And 3, we can proceed with the meeting and defer a recommendation and vote. Absent board members will then have the ability to read the transcripts and we can continue at a later meeting.
Mr. Shepherd, we also have another issue because we have one of the board members who's going to be
Correct.
departing at 5:30, you say?
No.
So we may not at
1, 2, 3.
4. I don't know if that's really appropriate for such an important matter. And I'm willing, I want to start because we need to start. We may have to when we get to that point, we may have to reconsider if we continue or, right?
Yes, Felix.
Chairman, I would suggest number 3, and even with present company leaving prematurely, although we would not have the quorum, we would lose the quorum at that time, the quorum would be lost for a vote. the discussion can continue, and we would be able to provide the verbatim minutes to all three members at that time, depending on how far along we get in the hour and a half that we have before the 5:30 time. And you know, we can then have that to be able to conclude the discussion and vote with hopefully all the members present at the next planning board meeting.
Christina, let me ask you a question, please. Since we have advertised as a planning and zoning board meeting, which is quasi-judicial, even though this item is legislative, do we need to, because of sunshine laws, if we lose the quorum, are we allowed to continue?
So you would not lose the quorum. You would still have 4 members, if I'm not mistaken, right? We would not lose a quorum.
He leaves at 5:30.
Once he leaves at 5:30, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4
Yeah, we will have,
members
you're right,
left,
we
We'll
will
have
have
quorum.
Still
quorum.
have the quorum.
and we can continue. Okay.
So it's a matter of,
And just to answer for the sake of discussion, if you lost a quorum, you can continue discussion, you just could not take any action.
right.
Okay.
And the verbatim minutes could be made available to all the board members, or they could watch a tape of the discussion.
That's
to
an
be able-
option.
To be able to hit the ground running at the next time and complete it.
Yeah. And you could, I mean, you could also decide at, you know, when you lose, when Mr. Withers has to leave, you could decide to maybe conclude this one and then continue it at, you know, a later meeting. It's, all the
No.
options are really available.
But I think, you know, Felix, your recommendation is probably a good one. You continue, we may not take a vote until we get all 7 board members present.
Exactly.
You know?
And I think that would be fair. And specifically, you know, I would like to hear the input of, you know.
2 architects, which to me are,
Correct.
you know,
And you took the words out of my mouth. Right.
Right, there's 2 architects that are missing tonight, or this afternoon.
Okay.
All right, if everybody's okay, we'll go ahead and continue with this matter at this time. Is that good?
You okay with that too?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney, could you please read into the record?
Yes.
the Agenda item?
E1 is an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 5, Architecture, Section 5-200, Mediterranean Standards, Article 3, Uses, Section 3-402, Restrictions related to location, and Article 16, Definitions, to enhance the quality of Coral Gables Mediterranean design by requiring a conceptual design review, removing duplicative criteria, relocating inapplicable standards, supplementing existing criteria, and including additional Mediterranean building examples, providing for severability, repeater, codification, and providing for an effective date.
So good afternoon, Jennifer Garcia, planning official. And so the memo today actually is just capturing what was discussed at the last meeting 2 weeks ago. The red lines that are in here should look familiar. They were on your draft from last September meeting, from 2 weeks ago. And the ones in purple are the ones that are incorporated from last time discussion, right? So some of the comments are from Alex Adams, a member of the public who came and had some comments, additional comments for the board to consider. There were some clarifications by some of the board members here that are incorporated into this draft in purple. So as to save time, that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
You do have a PowerPoint of all the, right? You don't?
No, this was here to discuss and get your feedback.
Because
remember?
we'd say last time, I got some comments
Right.
that I don't know if then we're not gonna be able to put it up to go through, you know, through each of
We
those.
all have the same draft, so we can go page by page if you wish to do that way.
Before we proceed, Jennifer, sorry, Joe.
Yes.
Do we have anybody that has signed up to speak?
No one has indicated they wish to speak.
Okay. Nobody in Zoom or phone platform either?
I'll send them a message, but no.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to go ahead and close it for public comment. Chip, would you like to start us off?
No. I mean, I'm not quite sure I totally understand. I thought we were going to go point by point and discuss them as we went through, no?
That is
We
what-
had also mentioned some people had some red lines to share with the board. We can, again, go page by page if you want to do it that way.
Well,
We've
I
had
know Felix wanted to go page
Well,
by
no,
page.
no, that's
or
okay. I mean,
Item
but
by item is what he had said. I think You know,
I think if we went through it, it might be easier.
if we go through
Me
it,
go through mine and then.
Agreed.
I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Right.
Don't you?
Yeah, and I think what Robert was intending by having it up there is that then it's easy to go from one to two, everybody's looking at it. And also anybody that's home watching this.
Samples.
You know, will understand where we are, you know, where it would be the same thing as this, except page by page you're going through it.
Right, so we've had it in the past
Right.
for every
So
single meeting.
would you
but
be
yes,
able to bring it up or?
I can find it and email it to,
but we can go ahead and continue while they're looking for it. Felix, you want to get us going?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. So, on the memorandum from staff, before you get into this thing, there were a few questions that I had. This was the best, you know, staff, what they're trying to do is capture the previous meeting before this particular meeting. And I think that when you look at that, one of the things is some of the criteria, this is the second paragraph of the first page, and it says, some of the criteria was revised or removed, such as porch balcony depths, and insisted to keep other proposed criteria, such as window design standards and habitable liner requirements. If you recall, that was where we really got to page one, where we were talking about the depth, which is not, you know, it's not shown anywhere like the city of Miami does, you know, which is the depth of the liners. And it just so happens that that particular evening, we had looked at a project that we had recommended approval for that hasn't gone to the commission yet. And they had hidden the parking areas, which that was the discussion with that. We still don't have, you know, a minimum depth on this, but that's something that is shown here. That's something that should be discussed at some point, trying to establish a minimum depth of the liner that would go in front of the parking areas inside the mixed-use buildings. The second thing is that I thought that it was a little unfortunate the way that it was written, number 5 on the first page, which was prohibited horizontal and vertical sliding windows and doors of the buildings. I think it's almost like a run-on sentence. What we started to discuss was keeping the windows and doors, you know, separate, so you have either A, horizontal, or B, vertical opening and closing fenestration. And there was a discussion that we had where we had a difference of opinion of whether you could see or not see. We discussed also in detail the Juliet balconies, whether they could be done one way or the other. I know we have the city architect here and one of the board members from the Board of Architects here today. And I know that they have in the past discussed the Juliet balconies and how to do it in such a way that it looks symmetrical and it's on the same plane. One of the discussions that we had specifically was, you know, whether when you're looking at the fenestration on these, especially tall buildings, where you have the sliding doors, where there's a difference between the two, it makes it look different. And we also discussed specifically that some of the buildings that have been built, although the Board of Architects were blamed for them, they actually got changed during the shop drawing process, and they were switched and never went back to the Board of Architects, and they were administratively reviewed by someone other than a member of the Board of Architects or the city architect at that time. The generalizing the option number 7 as an option for the first 3 to 4 stories to be activated with habitable space and consistent with high-quality materials. I think high-quality materials should be used throughout the buildings. I see that certain developers in this city really go all out to use quality materials, and I don't think it should be limited to 3 or 4 stories. I think you could see that all the way through. And I think that if you're, this is a bonus that is being provided to not only give great architecture, but also great materials that are long-lasting. And I don't think that there should be a limit to just the first 3 or 4 stories. And I understand that some of the elements that you might be able to look at, you should be able to look at them, but make sure that the quality of the materials throughout look good. And we see other examples of Mediterranean inspired design, and they use poor materials, and you could see it whether it's on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th story. So that's the only other comment I have.
Felix, but let me ask you, because we talked about it briefly, and I don't know where you're reading from, because I
I'm
don't.
sorry, the memorandum, the first page.
Oh, that's
last
the
month,
previous
from
one,
last-
not the current
Okay.
one?
The original one.
No, I'm
You're reading from the original.
from the original one, because that's where we started the conversation.
Right.
And these again, these are not necessarily provisions that are in the code itself. This was what staff captured from our previous conversations, and that's what that front page was.
But Jennifer, you've updated those in what you sent us now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the latest.
Because-
So that's what we have.
This
September
is more
26th.
confusing, but
Yes.
Because I think that's confusing. I'd rather, if we can, read from what has been updated.
Okay,
And-
I'll read from what's updated, but what's updated is, some of these things are omitted, and that's why I didn't feel comfortable with that. No, in other words.
because the liner is one example that is in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, other levels.
Correct.
But we also talked about it, which I'm in favor, but where feasible, right?
Correct, and if you recall, we discussed, you and I both discussed that where feasible, which should be in there. And again, one of the issues here is that this really is not part of the med bonus. It's really part of more of the zoning code itself, not necessarily of med bonuses. But when you're using the liners, having a prescriptive way of saying you're going to have a minimum of 20 feet is, I think, what we were discussing, where feasible. And for example, Glenn Pratt's project that came before us that particular evening, he was able to do it where it was feasible, not all the way around. And he had a very difficult site. It was not only triangular, but it was also, it had street facing all the way around. So that became very difficult for him there, but, we looked at it for what it was. So the last comment that I don't see here from the previous one, and if you could indulge me, it's the last comment, Mr. Chairman. It says, incorporated an optional requirement to provide the additional open space and reduce the amount to pay to the 0.25. Staff started to address that comment at the last meeting. I still don't understand it. I'm not that smart, but I'd like to be able to understand where the
open space
0.25,
fund?
how it works.
Yeah, the open space fund. So as you know, there is a fund, like a CIP fund that the city has that routinely puts money into it for acquisition of parks, right? Open space in our city.
Right.
So part of the optional, remember these are 12 options that they can do, 6 of the 12 if it's multifamily, or 8 of the 12 if it's mixed use. They could have that option. Maybe it's a small site, they can't provide a lot of open space, so they could pay into a fund that would eventually have open space available by the city in the area.
Right, and Mr. Chairman, I want the board members to remember that comment. And the reason I want them to remember the comment is because there's also a sustainability bonus in the med bonuses there. And for me, I think that, the sustainability should be a requirement, not a bonus for Mediterranean-style architecture. And putting money into a park fund should not be one of the, again, we're getting into the check off, we're going to check this off. One thing has nothing to do with the Mediterranean style, has nothing to do with it, and it should not be there. If you want to give, if someone can't meet their green space, I think we have a different conversation. Has nothing to do with the bonuses. I just wanted either A, take it off the table or discuss it during, when we're looking at the required items, to be able to achieve that bonus. So, Mr. Chairman, those are all the comments I had on the transmittal, the original transmittal that was there. And I know that staff has floated the 20-foot habitable liner. I don't have an issue with that. But some of these things, I think, we can't lose focus that we're giving people a bonus, and bonuses, all bonuses, are discretionary. So because they're discretionary, we can ask for these things, but for the style and to give the Board of Architects and the city architect the ability to provide more power to be able to achieve architecturally what we're asking them to achieve in return for a bonus, I think is important.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sue?
Well, I certainly don't have that level of detail to talk about, but I agree with Felix when it was like if you provide a bike rack, in the old. I mean, we can't be arbitrary and throw a bike rack in, and that's part of your requirement. I totally agree. Putting money into a fund should just be part of the zoning code if they don't have enough space for green space, not a requirement that they get by for Mediterranean bonus.
Yeah, just to clarify, that wasn't to get out of a requirement for green space. It was just in addition to any green space that they have on site that's required of them, 25% for multifamily and 10% for mixed use. This would be in addition to that, just to clarify that.
Right, but that's an arbitrary thing. It has nothing to do with what the building looks like.
Yeah, understood.
To me, the requirements are, does it look Mediterranean? Okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I have several questions, and some of them is going to be for our city attorney. For example, in the context analysis, and that has been modified, and I had some conversation with Jennifer regarding this one particular.
I'm sorry, Robert, what page are you on?
Page 5 of the development bonus standards, number 1, which is context analysis.
So if we can have that pulled up on the screen. I think Jill has that ready. The first one.
And my question is, because we talked about it, if contextually is in the surrounding, the existing condition, but you may be in a MX2 zoning and you have one-story buildings. To me, I want to make sure that the context analysis is based on not only what's there, but what the future development potential is based on the zoning. And I want to make sure that the language is provided assures that you could do that. Because if you're zoned, to be able to do a 77-foot building, and you only have one-story building next to you today, doesn't mean that the uses and the zoning allows you to do that. Otherwise you're gonna prohibit that landowner doing what the zoning allows.
Right, and that was the intent of having compatible with the existing and planned context.
And the plan context refers to the zoning.
Right, yes.
Okay.
Future land use map, yes.
I would just like to add my opinion when Robert is done with this particular point.
See, so I want to make sure that it does states that you also have to consider the existing zoning that is in that, for that particular site.
Can I ask a question regarding this context? I'm all for the context and compatibility features, but what if you have an area in the city that has glass buildings? I mean, nothing Mediterranean at all. And a project comes in that's Mediterranean and they're asking for bonuses. How does that fit into that? How does a Mediterranean...
No, because I think that the Board of Architects will have the authority to approve or not approve the project. that is too specific, and I think the board, my concern is that you have zoning that, is MX1, and you have existing one-story, two-story building, and you're gonna come in with a building that's gonna be taller. Are you then not, because you're not contextually compatible with the existing building, you're not allowed to do what the zoning allows?
Wouldn't that be picked up in the initial conceptual review? Doesn't that the first step is the conceptual review before it goes to the Board of Architects? Would that not be discussed at that point?
Yes, but not this actual criteria.
Right.
This criterion will be discussed at the Med Bonus
Okay.
public meeting.
And I want to make sure, look, I'm
Yeah,
all
I
for the
understand.
compatibility, but you cannot take away the zoning and says, well, you're zoned for X, but because you got a one-story building next to you, you won't be able to do that.
Right. Right. Then again, the intent is existing and planned context of the area.
Okay, I just want to make
And then
sure
we
that,
clarify that's within one block.
just
right?
want to make sure that,
If that was the intent, it sounds like it's been, incorporated in here with that intent. Yeah.
because when I consulted to a, land use attorney that come here, and they were not. I wanna
It would
say-
like, you're saying that there's a concern that it should be more explicit.
Yes.
There are different ways of resolving these issues. One of them, first of all, when the Board of Architects reviews their plans, they're reviewing it according to Section 5102, which is the design review standards. Forget about the bonuses. First, it's the review standards. And in there specifically, it says architectural compatibility with the neighboring properties and uses. As far as the context is concerned, the zoning, as you say, in this particular example of 77 feet, and let's say you're near or across a waterway, or you're across a public right-of-way, and you have two-story single-family residential. How do you work out the compatibility issue there? Because you said MX1, but what if it's single-family residential?
No, that's a different,
No, I just want to make
single family,
sure.
I will concur with you.
Okay, that's.
Single
what-
family, but
Right.
if you have, and I don't know if you have an MX1 and you got existing two-story building next to you, and then you're gonna come in with a,
Right. One of the things that I find excruciating when I see some of the developments that have been built is that we'll have an 8-story building next to, right across the street from single family. So I find that wrong. But the other way contextually is that you have the ability from massing, that the Board of Architects has the responsibility to look at massing, and you have the ability of stepping down, not taking the rights away, the zoning rights away. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands there's a difference between the design review standards that the Board of Architects has to make sure that they review as part of their charge. And then the second thing is the discretionary bonuses. So we're talking about two different things. If you're allowed 4 floors, but with the bonuses, you're allowed 6 floors. When you're looking at the massing of the building, you on the Board of Architects have the ability to say, well, wait a minute, you have to step back those 2 floors so at least you ameliorate the particular issue of the compatibility and the contextual. It would be obviously wrong to take away the right and illegal to take away the right, but the Board of Architects has the ability to say, well, wait a minute, how can we make it more
but Felix, you want to
compatible?
make it simpler for them to do the interpretation. You don't want it to be, questionable. You want to make sure that when they look at it, it says, based on this, they're compatible. And that's my point. For the board to facilitate the process for them.
I will tell you that I respectfully disagree with what has been built recently in the last 10, 15 years in this city. Why? Because thank God that the zoning code on Lejeune Road said that for the first, 100 feet, I can't remember, 100, 150 feet.
100 feet, 45 feet.
Right, 45-foot maximum. Gee, why did they put that in? Because across the street on Lejeune Road, they're duplexes. But when you have that building behind it stepping down, that makes the compatibility and the contextual component of
Felix,
it.
I don't think that's the argument here. I agree 100%.
Right, but if you tie the Board of Architects' hands, and you don't allow them to suggest the massing component of it, why do we have a Board of
We're not
Architects?
saying to tie the hand, on the contrary.
Right.
We're trying to make it, I think, clear for them to make that,
So that it's not arbitrary.
yes. I mean, I think that the compatibility is one that you're going to have, and nothing has to do with single family, because, if you have a two-story single family in front, you have more options. This is more, and look at the example, say MX1 or something to that, and you may have an area. For example, I'm gonna use the district, the design district by the collection. Now it's all built, or pretty much, but you had a zoning that allows you to do up to, back then, up to whatever, 10 stories, 120 feet, whatever. But you had existing one-story buildings. So if you go by the wording, here, you got to look at the what's there in the area. You will not give them, the board, the discretion says, even though, you got one-story building, you could do X.
Christina, let me ask you a question. When a project is presented to the Board of Architects, what is, or maybe Gus is better at answering this, when a project is presented to the Board of Architects, what is their responsibility to look at and not look at? Do they go ahead and look at zoning? Do they look at other items, or do they look at design?
Yes, so Mr. Chair, I would like Gus to answer, since Gus does, from our office, when we do service counsel to the board at their meetings, when there's big projects or special questions, Gus does service counsel to the Board of Architects, so I'd ask him to give the guidance that he has given over the years.
Thanks. Welcome, Gus.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, fellow board members, Assistant City Attorney Gus Ceballos. So I've reviewed the most recent planning and zoning meetings, and I think there's a bit of confusion as to what the Board of Architects really can look at. So there is zoning-related items, meaning upzoning, change of comp plan, all those things. Those items are not within the purview of the board. Now, the question of height and massing, that is 100% within the purview of the board. The best example I gave to the board recently was if a building is allowed 100 feet per code, and with Mediterranean bonus, they can go to 120. When they review whether a property meets Mediterranean bonus, you look at the Mediterranean standards. You apply that section of the code, and a property could check all the boxes and meet the criteria and be a Mediterranean bonus, a Mediterranean style building, and meet the criteria for level 1 and level 2 bonuses. So now that building that was 100 feet now can be 120 feet. But then when the design review of the building happens, which is the second step, because typically the board will grant the bonus first and then review the design. At that moment, the board could make a determination that because of the massing and the context, that an 80-foot building is appropriate. Even though in this particular situation, they could do 100 feet or 120 feet, because of the surrounding neighborhood, because of the context, that they believe that the appropriate building here is 80 feet. Now, it's a little confusing at times because you're looking at the same similar issue, but under two different lenses. So you cannot be looking at it in the lens of zoning and determining whether there's appropriate sewer or right-of-way improvements. Those are items that are handled elsewhere. They're not for the aesthetic review board. But if aesthetically, because of the compatibility of the context and the massing, a particular building shouldn't be 120 feet in this area. Maybe if it gets set back, maybe a portion gets pushed back, and the massing of it changes, that is all within the purview of the board. So
How often does that happen, where the board says, not 120, but 80 is better? How often does that happen?
I can't speak to that. I'm not at every meeting, but I don't think it happens often.
Mr. Ceballos, I have a question.
Sure.
I don't see anywhere where it says aesthetics. It says design review standards. Nowhere does it say aesthetics.
What I mean aesthetics,
He meant design.
I mean design.
I'm sorry, the reason I'm saying that is because that minimizes what the Board of Architects does. When you're talking about massing, as you just said, those are not aesthetics. We're talking about design review standards, the massing, how you set back. I mean, for me, I would want to make sure that from a massing standpoint, for example, there's a great example, which I will not name the project right now. It is a very tall project. It is on a street, and they have all the massing right on the edge of this street. I would have said, you still can have your square footage, but you should push the massing back. And that's what the Board of Architects can do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the design review standards, which are on these two simple pages, says it specifically, building scale and mass, building facade step backs. I mean, what I would do, the city architect, I would give this to every board member to make sure they know that they have that ability to do that. Because if they subjectively say, I'm going to reduce your allowed height, that is given from a zoning standpoint.
So let's be clear. I would
That is a
never.
taking.
You cannot say that. There's a difference.
Okay.
There's a difference in saying you have a zoning that you can build up to 100 feet, but I don't think it's appropriate. It needs to be 90. That's a problem.
That is
now.
Code Harris.
Now, if you can articulate that because the design review standards, the compatibility and the massing, this particular building is not appropriate for the neighborhood, for the abutting properties at this particular height, the massing should be revised so that this 100-foot area be reduced to 70, 80, whatever that may be, and move around the design of the building. That is 100% permissible. See how I'm saying the same thing but in two different ways?
Right.
And I try to make that distinction to the board. I've probably presented this before the board maybe 5 times at least, but there's a distinction to be made.
I don't disagree with what you said. The only thing I objected to was the word aesthetic.
That's my apologies. I meant design review standards.
I'm just saying it's not aesthetic. What they have to do is very important. And from a contextual standpoint, there's absolutely no doubt. And I think you could have it both ways as long as the Board of Architects understands what they can and cannot do. And it has to be crystal clear. But the massing is one of the largest tools that they have in their tool chest to make it compatible and make us a different and a nicer place.
Agreed.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
I think we're good.
I still have a question that hasn't been answered, because we're talking about architectural compatibility. If a project comes in on a piece of property where it's surrounded by glass buildings, is that compatible? Would that Mediterranean project be compatible with a sea of glass buildings?
That would be in the CBD area, which would be the only place where you
Yeah,
can.
and it will be compatible, but then you're not going to get the bonuses that you're seeking.
The quick answer to that would be up to the Board of Architects. They would make the determination if it was compatible or not.
On a case-by-case basis.
On a case-by-case basis, yes.
Each individual building,
On a
each
case-by-case
individual
basis.
project comes in.
And since you're on the subject, to be very specific, the Alan Morris iconic building on Alhambra. On the Alan Morris project in Alhambra, which is on a very acute angle, it was surrounded by very, brutalistic architecture. And they chose to do something which is iconic today and use the quality of materials and the massing and everything else. And basically, that was along the lines of the Mediterranean bonus. And sometimes you're actually providing that, and you have contextual, which you normally would look at, but you have to be careful because the reason that you're providing this discretionary bonus is specifically to be able to promote a specific style And in order to have that style, to get those discretionary bonuses, that's where you try to turn the corner and make the exception. So I think that when you're promoting Mediterranean bonuses for Mediterranean architecture, it's very specific. You would not be providing Mediterranean bonuses for another glass building or another brutalistic concrete building.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying, it becomes then subjective.
Exactly.
You have a sea of, so aren't we supposed to get very specific here about how to navigate Mediterranean bonuses?
Well, the problem is that the first subject that was brought up, which was the contextual study, is the most broad of them. As you proceed through the sections, you're going to have much more specific type of constraints. So the biggest one is on the contextual, which Robert brought up, is what happens when I have this type of zoning. Am I going to be, am I going to suffer because I'm next to something that isn't necessarily going to meet the scale requirement when I set it up right next to it?
Yeah, and I understand the scale and all that, but that's not what I'm talking about. We were talking about architectural compatibility. So for a novice, if I have a glass building and there's a project coming in that's wants to be a med bonus building, and it says it has to be compatible according to this, if I was on the Board of Architects, I'd say, well, it's not compatible. No, you don't get the bonus.
I just want to make sure there's clarity on this. The reason that the med bonuses were first brought up was because all of the buildings in the CBD area were glass buildings or brutalistic architecture. And then the bonuses came in once a specific building was built 40 years ago, and that specific building became the template for other people to start building that particular style because they wanted to achieve the bonuses, achieve a specific look. And the other buildings, which were there 40 years ago, are still there. But you do see more of an influence because there are very few more of those glass buildings that were built from 40 years forward.
No, I understand why this came to be. I'm just saying that we're getting very specific on what needs to be required to get the med bonus. And then we're saying, yeah, but regarding that architectural compatibility, it's up to the board.
No, not necessarily.
It's contextual,
Contextually,
very different than,
style or design.
Yes.
It's design is I think design is going to be very restrictive of what you're going to be able to do.
Right.
Contextually, more of the scale.
right. It's more of a massing,
Right.
a massing tool than a detailed architectural tool.
Yeah,
That's the difference
No,
between
no, and I get where
context.
Robert's coming from, and that's not what I'm talking. I'm not talking about massing. I'm talking about look. I'm talking about architectural compatibility. Isn't that the look?
So in each case, the Board of Architects would review the particular design that's being presented, and in that particular case, would apply the criteria and would make that determination in each particular case. There's not one size fits all. It's in each particular case, it would make the determination. It's not subjective. It's based on the criteria and on the standards.
Well, so it doesn't have to be architecturally compatible, is it what you're saying?
So
Not necessarily because
it doesn't have to be the same design, right? I don't want to.
yeah, it doesn't have to be. The board have the authority to say, that's a glass building. We're not going to give you the bonus on this. It has.
Look, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't build a med-style building next to a glass structure, but should they get the med bonus?
Well, I think you're talking more about should they build a taller building. I think your concern is if you're talking about the med bonus, to me you're talking about adding more FAR or more height.
Well,
I think what Robert or what's being said is compatibility between a design if it's a glass structure next to a Mediterranean building.
I'm not talking about massing. I'm not talking about additional height. I'm talking about the look. You're nodding. I think you know what I'm
Yeah,
getting at.
and-
I don't
and
care if there's a
I don't know if I have the answer yet. Peter Kiligian, I sit on the Board of Architects. I'm here
Could you
today.
state your name and address,
Peter
please?
Kiligian, 1330 Northwest, 84th Avenue, PPKS offices.
Thank you.
I sit on the board. I'm here today. I'm the co-chair. Judy is the chair. She's not here today. I don't know if I have the answer for you, but the way that I see it, the entire city is a Mediterranean-based city. So in the larger context, any Mediterranean building is contextual in the city. The ones that are glass boxes are not contextual. So it would not be inappropriate to have a Mediterranean building in an area where there's brutalist or glass boxes. I don't know if that helps.
You
or
say it
not.
would not be?
It would not be, no, it would not be appropriate to give a Mediterranean bonus to a non-med building that's, in the.
But, okay, just to clear, because if you're gonna have, let's say, next on Alhambra, where it's the most example of the glass building, the brutalist, if you come in the Alan Morris, which is a good example of Mediterranean, that building, even though it's in contextually in that area, would get the bonuses.
Yes.
That's the
Right?
point.
Yes, what I'm saying is that, and to take it a step further, the context can be further out than just a block when you're speaking of such large buildings. So,
Well, not according to this, it's a block according
well,
to.
and I think,
Immediate context.
yeah.
But Sue, the point is, and I think that example is on Alhambra. You got, some glass buildings, and you got some brutalist building, and then you got a beautiful Mediterranean building that today will also get the same bonuses, these bonuses.
Yeah.
So it could be adjacent, to a glass building, but if contextually it's appropriate, I think that's.
It's contextual within the city because we are a Mediterranean-based city.
Yeah, if I could. So we're talking about the proposed building massing shall be compatible with the existing and planned context, period. Analysis is within a block. That's the immediate context. So the one block is not your context. They're going to be compatible with the existing and planned. Existing plan is for the entire city. And as we know, our planned architectural style we want to go with, based on George Merrick's immediate
Well, then why
initial
even have
vision, was to have Mediterranean.
Why even have this in there about architectural compatibility if the whole city is Mediterranean and it's a given? Why even consider that?
Because there's difference.
Because context is both language, massing, proportional. So it's more than just, I understand your point, and it's a good point, right, if we're next to glass building, but there are other things. There's building typology, there's massing, there's proportions, things like that. So it's not just one aspect of the building, it's several aspects.
And Juan Riesco, city architect, I think that's part of the value that we add to cities is also the distinction in building types and typologies and styles and looks. I don't think, we understand that this city is based on the Mediterranean style, and that's our core standard, and I think we want that. But I think there's also viability to differences. And buildings that, like the glass structures that are time-dated buildings that were built in the 80s or the 70s, whenever they came about. The brutalist style was also a period building that there was prevalent at that time, and it was built, and it's a timestamp of that particular era. And I think that's part of the beauty of the city, that there is viability in versatility, that things that are different are good, that it's not all the same cookie cutter style that I think that would be something that would be
And if
derogatory to a certain extent, coming from a profession where creativity.
And by the way, I'm not saying don't build Mediterranean next to a glass building. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying, should that Mediterranean project get the bonus if it's not compatible with the glass buildings and the brutalist buildings all around it?
But you got to look at each case and the building that is being proposed,
I have I think, a good example, which I think the architects will agree. The Luminaire building. Luminaire building is a classic building by Ronnie Mateo. Very small building there, right on Ponce.
It's contextual in terms of the
Directly
mass, the
across the
size.
street.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Julio Gravier isn't here, but when he designed the Colonnade building, which is Mediterranean, and it saved and preserved the original colonnade building that is directly across the street. If we did it, if we go backwards in time, when Ronnie Mateo came in to the Board of Architects and showed them what he was doing with the Luminaire building, which was specifically selling types of furniture which are very contemporary, very cutting edge type of furniture, that building really made a statement. It has won numerous architectural awards, and on top of that, it is directly across the street from someone that did take advantage of the bonuses. Ronnie Mateo's building did not take advantage of any bonuses because it was never intended to be that way. The diversity of that type of architecture, which is really just great architecture, I think that's a perfect example. You have a bonus to promote Mediterranean.
Correct.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it was also preserving a historic jewel. And then across the street, you have a very low-key, award-winning, contemporary building that I don't find offensive. In fact, I think is aesthetically incredibly good, in my opinion. But they didn't ask for a bonus.
Correct.
Now, there had been mistakes made over the years. Don't need to name them, but for me, I think as you once said, the cat is out of the bag. You get med bonus for med architecture, and that was the theme and the problem that we had in the CBD area that wasn't being addressed all the time. So I think contextually, they can coexist.
And you could still do another Luminaire building today if you're not asking for the bonuses.
Correct. It's not
You know,
something we would not say is
You could do
compatible or
it.
contextual. I mean, I think
Look, I've got no issue with what you're saying. I'm saying that if that's the case, let's just eliminate the architectural compatibility component of this thing, because it really doesn't matter in the end.
No, it does. It does. It does.
I think it actually does.
It's a very important tool, very, very important tool that the Board of Architects absolutely 100% needs.
Why? Because
I
they
think
can
there's
make an
various
arbitrary
components to
decision.
compatibility, I think is the issue. Compatibility is not just, I look like this guy. There's compatibility in terms of mass, there's compatibility in terms of scale, there's compatibility in terms of materiality.
But this says
there's
architectural, not scale, not height. It says architectural.
I'll give
What
you.
is architect? I mean, maybe I'm
I'll give you-
misinterpreting architecture.
I'll give you
but
one
I think
last-
it's the look, isn't it?
Sue, I'll give you one last.
No, there's
So
components to
remember, we need to
compatibility.
speak
That's what I'm
one,
trying to say.
we need to speak one at a time for the court reporter, please. Sorry.
Okay, so let me give you one last example. I was just in Boston. At Boston University, they built a technical building, which is completely out of place. I mean, I looked at it immediately. The name that came to me was vomiting drawers. It looks like it has vomiting drawers. Contextually, it is very misaligned with that area, that one block area. It would fail miserably, but they got it approved. They built it. The scale is so out of scale, and the detailing, etc. In my opinion, the architect, I'm sure, is a genius, but in my opinion, it's so out of place that I had to drive around, get out of the car, and walk through it and look at it to see what the redeeming values were. That's my personal opinion. But if I were on the Board of Architects reviewing that building there, contextually, being a contemporary building, not because it's a contemporary building, a Mediterranean building, or any other style, it's just out of scale, out of place. And that's part of what this contextual component is, which is a key tool that they need in their toolbox.
Look, we do have something very close at the Douglas Metroville station. We got buildings that are 36 stories building. Are they out of context? Yes, they are. We know that. That's more, doesn't matter the style. It's the massing, the proportions of the building. And I think I'm not concerned because I think the board will have all the tools necessary to be able to say if it's, architecturally compatible or not. Am I not? Don't you?
No, I think the board understands that and is well-equipped in that regard, and does that on a weekly basis with the projects. Based on the constraints that we have and the zoning issues and whatever things are allowed. But we're looking at the aesthetics of the building, the mass of the building, and remember, we walk a fine line every day between property rights and design.
And you look at
And that's our charge, that's our challenge, is, how do we make this better while allowing the applicant to do what they're allowed to do? And so we got to be careful in how we steer that, but the board is very well.
I think my original question is answered when Jennifer said plan surrounding area. That means that's take consideration the zoning.
Right. Well, zoning, master plan, comprehensive plan, all those together, yes.
And I'm sorry, I just realized something. We've been discussing this, I think it's a very good discussion, very, very important. This that we're discussing now is a prerequisite. In other words, you're not getting any bonus for this. This is not part of the checklist.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I missed it. I missed the argument. You have a good point, but this isn't something that you're checking off to get that bonus. This is a prerequisite that you have to go in there, and this is one of the things at the very beginning, which it wasn't written like this, a long time ago when they first started doing this.
Well, I have to say, and thank you for Gus, wherever Gus went.
Right behind there.
Hi, Gus. For letting us know what the Board of Architects can do, because in the past couple of meetings, it was very clear that it sounded like the board was being handcuffed in certain areas. And I really hope that every member does now understand that they do have the purview to do what they're supposed to do, okay? Because I know that was Felix had brought that up initially. This has been brought up at a number of meetings, and maybe Gus, you need to let them know it for the 6th time that they have this purview, because obviously some people felt uncomfortable on that board going there.
Do you want to continue, Robert?
Yes. My next one is one of the comments that we brought up earlier about Juliet balconies. If we prohibit, and it's, on I guess, item number, I got on page 13, horizontal or vertical sliding windows and door are prohibited on the exterior of the building facade. If you do that, then you're not be able to do Juliet balconies, right? Because if you have the intent of a Juliet balcony, that you could open up a sliding glass door. If you take that away, you won't be able to do a Juliet balcony.
I think recently the Board of Architects allowed a Juliet balcony with a certain detail that you requested.
Yeah, it was actually a window.
Can you explain
It was
that?
actually a fixed panel at the Juliet balcony level and a casement window.
Right.
So it had a railing?
Oh, yes?
Yeah, it had the railing height with a fixed window.
So you have a
and the
glass
railing
panel in
up.
front of the
It was an
railing.
operable window, so you could open it.
Yeah?
And still get the
Well-
sensation of the Juliet balcony.
But-
without-
All right, one speaker at
Below-
a time, please, so the court reporter could.
Yeah, so again, the window in this particular project had a component that went up to the guardrail height, and that was a fixed panel. So that's not operable, it's solid. The railing sits in front of that. And then above the railing was a casement window, so you can open the window, and the perception of the Juliet balcony is still there without the bottom portion of it. And that's kind of the concession we made as a design alternate to the concept of the Juliet balcony, because I think the board in unison feels that sliding doors are not appropriate on a med building. And that's the reason.
Yeah, and I think Judy expressed the same thing previously, but the point is that a Juliet balcony, as far as the depth is concerned, is basically not quite, an issue, but you aesthetically can still get exactly what you need to get.
Yeah, the intent of a Juliet balcony is not to step out into it, is to open and experience the outdoors from within.
Juan, are you familiar with the Venero project? It's now called the Standard
Venera, the one in front of that big park, the curved building?
Yeah.
Yes.
That has Juliet balconies. Are you familiar with this project?
Am I what?
Are you familiar with that project?
Yeah, I
Okay.
remember the Venera. That
That
was like
had-
4 or 5 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Doesn't that got a med bonus? Doesn't that have sliding doors?
Probably,
Yes,
it may
it does.
have, at
And it got
that
a med
particular
bonus.
moment, that could have been
Because we keep mentioning the
something that-
Paseo and how the shop drawings got changed, but there are numbers of projects that went through the Board of Architects, went through planning and zoning, sliders, and they get a med bonus. So how do we protect that from actually happening? Is this going to be?
I think there's been a progression over the years, because I sat on the board for 11 years, and I experienced the prior administration and what the thought process was, and now I'm the city architect, and I understand the pushback from the community, and the fact that we really want med buildings, and the fact that we're changing the code to align ourselves more with the med bonuses and the med-style buildings. So there's been a progression over the years. And yes, have we made mistakes? Absolutely. You know, I think that's obvious. It's built and it's happened. But I think we've learned from them. And I think we're progressing to the point where we're making the buildings better and more in tune with, I think, what we all want.
Is there something in here that we can prevent a shop drawing from being changed after it goes through the process? Is there something we can put in here?
That's already been addressed. There was a time when the city architect staff did not review shop drawings. They only went to building and structural. And so now we've made that adjustments. Now it comes to city architect staff, and we all review it. And what my staff typically does, or if I review it, I typically handle the larger projects personally because they're more complex. But my staff is also trained in the fact that, you know, we get a shop drawing for windows, we got to go back to the BOA-approved record archive drawings, see what's on there. If it's a sliding door on there, our hands are tied. If the board made the concession or made the whatever, or missed it or did it intentionally, I'm not sure. But, you know, that's the procedure we have in place today. So that issue of somebody approving a shop drawing or changing it should not happen because everything is based on the prior approval. That's already in place.
In addition to that, number 12 now prohibits those types of windows and doors, just to be
Well,
clear.
Jennifer, one of the discussions that we had last time that we were here was the fact of how much space you need in a balcony to go ahead and do a French-style door to open up as opposed to a sliding door. And I think one of the discussions we also had was if you have a building that's 10 stories high, do you really see that division line?
And to further that discussion, there's also terraces and balconies that are inset really deeply. A lot of people are now requiring big terrace outdoor spaces for outdoor kitchens, for families, whatever. The dynamic has changed where now that we're getting into larger units, 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms, larger families living in these multi-story buildings. So we've had that discussion internally. Hey, you know, the concept of the sliding door, the Nana door, everybody likes the big openings. You know, nobody wants a little 6-foot door, open a door. And I'm in my terrace, it's 30 feet wide, and I only have a 6-foot opening. I want to open up the entire facade to create this indoor-outdoor space. So we're struggling with it, and we're trying to make criteria that would help us, you know, for example, on a deep balcony that's 15, 20 feet deep, that's really not perceivable from the edge of the building.
But how do you handle a 12, let's say you've got 12 feet interior, how do you handle that door, that swing on a 12-foot door to be able to open up with the space?
Well, like I said, there's now a product called a Nana door that's a complete opening. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that. It's a French
A
door.
folding door.
It's a folding door, like a bifold in a closet.
Right.
But it's a nice French door, framed glass. It looks just like a French door.
So that would qualify under the Mediterranean?
Again, that's
That would not
That's one of the discussions that we've had internally. We haven't, I think, finalized that directive yet.
The reason is because it's all on the same plane.
Correct.
So
It's an
when
opening,
you
and then
close
it opens up, you know, you can have a 20-foot wide opening, which is beautiful.
Right.
At a nice 10-story building where you can have a view of the Biltmore.
That makes sense. To me, that
So
makes sense. And the
We're
discussion.
working with that. Again, the board is very capable and very on top of new products, new strategies, dealing with this issue of the med style and how can we incorporate modern new technology, new materiality, new products, and incorporate it into these buildings and still achieve that look without compromising the scenario of a typical sliding door on a med building. How do we solve that problem? So we at the board work with this stuff weekly on project per project, and we try to always push the envelope and get these guys, the architects, to work on that concept of, hey, it's easy to just put a sliding door, draw it, you plop it in the computer and done, but how does that sliding door affect the integrity of the look of the building? And that's our charge. How does this thing come together at the end?
Well, that's good you bring that up. Should that sort of thing be in here?
Well,
I mean, it's addressing sliders, but what about technology where it's on the same plane?
Well, and again, I think that's something that happens at the board level on a weekly basis that may or may not make it to the code until 6 months from now or a year from now, because we're always getting new products, new stuff, and we're trying to analyze the pros and cons and the benefits of the products.
What you're doing now is in the prerequisite is you're trying to eliminate the use of a particular product because of the look, how it alters the facade.
Correct.
And I think also staff may have said that you are able to use them as long as they're not seen from the street level or something like that.
Yeah, that's another discussion, but again, I'll go
not
back to
there
the
yet.
example of the horizontal sliding windows. I think the board has taken a position and a posture on that and said, hey, absolutely, we've seen the buildings with the horizontal rolling windows. Definitely is not a productive look, especially for a med building. On a modern building, on a modern design, contemporary design,
All bets are off.
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We can do that. We can do fixed storefronts. We can go on all those avenues. But on a med building that's asking for med bonus, in our opinion, right now, that's something that we have definitely identified and said, hey, that's not appropriate.
What I'm hearing is that we need to give more discretion to the Board of Architects as opposed to to defining it specifically, know this, know this, know this.
Well, we don't want to be a prescriptive code either. We don't want to tie people's hands and say, hey, do A, B, C, and that's it. We want creativity. We want architects to push the envelope, to come up with ideas and to impress us and say, hey, guys, this is what we want to do, and then let these guys make the final call. But we don't want to tie their hands. And we don't, because then we're going to get redundancy and mediocre work.
Agreed.
Nobody's pushing the envelope. So
Well,
we
you
got to be
mentioned-
careful.
you
Again, we got to be
mentioned-
real careful on how we handle this because we don't want to go down the rabbit hole and get into a dead end, and then all of a sudden
All the
we're getting
buildings
the
look the
monotonous
same.
stuff. That's one thing we don't want. I have learned that in 35 years of practice that you don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's very hard to codify good architecture.
Well, you just mentioned fixed storefront, right? But the example that, I brought up here, which is the Alan Morris new building on University there.
Yeah, the Ponce
okay,
Park.
on Ponce, which is a very nice building. I think it went through everybody. But that has fixed storefront,
I think
right?
Big store for windows in the units or?
In the building, yeah. I mean, which I think is great. I think what they did is
Is it fixed
set
door
it
or
back.
fixed casements?
Well,
We push fixed casements, not.
this, at least from the rendering, doesn't look to be fixed
And
casement.
again, Robert, that may be on the design of the preliminary, but there's also the next tier, which is the construction documents, which I personally am involved in all those projects. And I review for that type of stuff. I look really carefully at, if the board approves something that, again,
Which, by the
on
way,
the plan,
I have
then my
no
hand is
issues
tied.
whatsoever. I think it's great, okay?
And by the way, easily,
it's not out here.
my daughter in Chicago lives in a Mies Van Rohe classic skyscraper. And it has a storefront built 70 years ago. And it has the storefront, and then it has a hopper window down below.
yeah.
And that building looks like it was designed yesterday. It's a classic, to say the least. So what I'm saying is that I agree with the BOA in the prerequisites of saying, look, don't use this whether you want to give them the option of using it around the backside where you can't see it, you know,
I
that,
think that's something that's applicable more to residential work.
Right.
Smaller scale, and
Right.
it's a resident, and it's not a developer that's
Right.
building a monster,
Right.
300,000 square foot building.
Right.
We give a little bit more leeway to our residents in regard to windows, for example. That's a great example where we do that. You know, we understand that the casement window is a superior product in terms of the look and the aesthetics, but it's also more expensive and more costly. And so on a resident level, there's a different dynamic than on a commercial product. So we do allow that on the residential, on the rear side of the houses, on the side yards where they're obscured from the street. We try to work with them because we know that, hey, there's a big difference between a $50,000 window package and a $25,000 window package. And some residents can't get to that $50,000 level, so we negotiate to a certain extent. And I think that's fair and reasonable, as long as we don't compromise the public realm, which is the front of the house.
Right.
So again, we try really hard to see both sides of the equation. But on commercial products, it's different. There's a lot more scrutiny, it's a lot tighter reins on that.
Okay.
Because we understand it's a for-profit project and it's not somebody's personal residence.
Robert?
My next comment is on bonus one level one requirements, number 2, where it says any storage of vehicles or off-street parking that is above grade should occur behind habitable space provided. And what I'm saying is
page are you on?
15, at least in
Sorry, all right.
15. What I'm saying is to add where feasible, just to make sure, because this is specifically says any storage of vehicles or off-street parking must occur behind habitable space. All I'm saying is where feasible, because you may have a lot that is 100 foot in depth, which a lot of the platted lot in the Gables are 100 feet. Then you will not be able to do the liner, the setbacks, and get a garage that is,
But this is also part of a 6 or 8 out of 12, right? So
Yes.
it's one that you may not have to check. I think that.
but example of Glenn's project.
One
that came-
project that just came in, the Alhambra Circle one.
You know, he did a great job.
Yeah, he basically had a site that was almost.
Yeah, that's
Next to
yeah.
Gables Elementary, is that the
Yeah.
site?
Yeah, yeah.
33 Alhambra?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes,
we're
fully surrounded by
Very
streets.
tough, and
Four
I have
fronts.
to,
To do it all the way around. I say I think you don't need to check it out, but where feasible, you do it. And I think he did it where it was feasible for him.
And again, I think that's at the discretion of the board and the design and the inherent features of the site, the property
But
restrictions.
have you read the language here?
No,
Juan?
I just
It
got
says
it.
mandatory that you have to do it. This is my point.
no, where feasible, I think should be added.
Yeah, this is mandatory. All I'm saying is to add where feasible. That gives the option that Glenn brought in,
Right, 100%.
okay?
So I have to ask again, so if they move forward with the Board of Architects and it's not feasible, do they check that off and get a point for that? Because we add the word when feasible, then they're going to have that as one of their criteria that they meet.
Right. If it's not feasible for them, they don't check that one off. That's the reason why we do what we do. We don't require all 12. You're only required 8. So you can negotiate with your client, your budget, your issues, and say, hey, I can do these 8, but I can't do that one.
Right, if
Maybe
it's not
that's the
feasible.
right property to do what you're trying to do.
And I agree with,
That's
yeah,
another-
the 100-foot property is impossible to do it. I agree with it.
That's
I agree with you
an obvious
100%.
answer from
But
my perspective is,
then you don't,
You wouldn't be able to satisfy that one.
you
You'd
wouldn't
have
be
to-
able to.
Right.
And then
It's
you
not,
might
you're not required to satisfy
And
that
will
one.
you be able to get, all the other 8? You may not be able to do it.
That's,
Then you would not be able
And
to
you're
do
not
it.
getting the bonus.
that's why the architect makes the big bucks. He's got to figure out the problem. But again, Robert, maybe the answer, the real answer there, this property of 100-foot depth is not appropriate for this commercial building where I need to put a parking garage. I think that might
But
be.
I, with all due respect, that comment to me is, really on a 100-foot property that you own in most of the Gables, it's not appropriate to do a commercial project.
A parking garage where you need depth to be able to park cars 90 degrees on both sides of a driveway? It
Then,
makes it
so
difficult.
you mean that-
No, you can do it, Robert. You can do a lot of things, but
Then you means that you're gonna do a one-story because you won't be able to circulate on the garage,
If anybody's, yeah.
right? I mean,
But again, that's one of the, you could do the garage without the liner, just don't check that mark. I guess, I don't know if you've put one of your projects through these 12 to see if,
it's not one of the criteria that can help me, so I don't use it. I use the other 8 that'll help me. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
part of the strategy.
But Jennifer, I think you have a good point. That was a good question.
Yeah, you don't add where feasible. You just don't use it.
But they don't.
If the concern is that if you have an entire block and you can only line a portion of that block, we can add something in that says for the front street, for example.
on the primary street or something,
Right.
you know,
Maybe
but you,
that's the answer.
but you
On the
cannot
primary
say it
side.
completely off because it's, okay.
Sorry, I'm sure. I just had a Board of Architects meeting today, 5 hours long. There was a lot of arguing, so I'm sorry, I'll back off a little bit. But I think maybe that's the answer. Maybe if you have a site that's an island like Glenn's project that has 4 facades, maybe we add verbiage that says 2 frontages, 1 frontage. You know, 'cause we understand there's a front and there's a back. You know, people have front faces and back, you know, so not everything can be beautiful on all sides. So apply the same mentality.
And the last comment is, like the back of house. You know, if you have only one street, and there may be only one street, you have no choice, but you have to put that FPL involved right in the front. So there was a section here that talked about back of house towards the back of the property. If you have an alley, I think it's
A no-brainer.
a no-brainer. But if you don't have an alley, you have no choice.
But I think, Robert, what we're trying to get at is to get the architect's attention to these things with it, like transformers, double detector check valves. You know, all the infrastructure stuff that's required on projects arbitrarily gets delegated to engineers. And then all of a sudden, I'm walking down the sidewalk and I'm looking at this beautiful painted red backflow preventer. And the only reason it was there is because the draftsman for the engineer that did the piping put it there on it. And it's not something
Not
that's...
necessarily.
Not always, sometimes.
No, I know not always, but
Yeah,
trust me,
yeah.
I do this on a daily basis. I'm reviewing these things.
Yeah.
And I talk to the architects in hindsight because some of these projects have gotten ahead of me or were here before I was. And I asked them, why did you guys decide to put the backflow preventer there? And, for example, the Venera project has that issue. I was filming, walking on sidewalk on that project, and I ran into the backflow. And I said, who in their right mind would put a backflow in the middle of a sidewalk? And nobody thought, it could be recessed, it could be alcoved, it can be put in the service dock where the service is to the, so there's ways around it. I know we have to negotiate with fire department people. And again, we do it daily in my office. I'm constantly talking to fire department and trying to figure out, hey, can we move this? Can we screen it a little bit? Can we set it back? Can I recess it? Can I do it vertically instead of horizontally? There's always 5 ways to skin the cat. But notoriously, a lot of people don't pay attention to that, and that's something that's come to the forefront in the last 5 or 6 years, again, that has come before me, because I'm the city architect, and everybody comes to me and says, hey, I got a problem, how do I fix it? So we try to figure these things out. So these things are on our radar now. My board of architects, guys, ask them where the equipment is. Ask them where the switchgear is. Where's the meter? Where's the transformer? Where's, because again, we're looking at projects, 20 minutes, half an hour, sometimes 45 minutes.
Do you know where the David Williams
Yes.
FPL transformer is?
No, I know.
It's on top of the roof.
On top of the roof?
On top of the roof.
Wow.
And they
a tough
had
one.
problems there. To get to that, it was absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah,
The problem is that today, with FPL, you would never,
No, you
ever
don't,
be able to
you
do
can't
that.
negotiate with them.
FPL is very tough to negotiate with. I do it, again, weekly. I have to make that call to the engineers and why here, we just went through it on the village. Jennifer and I went through it on the village project with an AT&T switchgear box that's a monster, that's 6 foot tall, and they want to put it right in the front of the building. No. Can we find it better, on the corner where there's a garage or something that's a service entrance, an alley, a driveway, something, to get it off the main presence of the building? So there's things that we can do, and again, we try very hard, and I know my board does it very good on a weekly basis. They are all over these things. There's a lot of information in this code that you guys have brought to light that I think is great ammunition for them to use moving forward. But these things are discussed all the time in our board meetings. I want to give you guys that comfort level. I know you have issues with buildings that have been built and that don't look great and have problems, but I think the awareness is there. And I think that's the most important thing that we've done, is bring this thing to the light and say, guys, we need to pay attention to these things that keep recurring, and we're fixing them. We're working on it really hard and on a weekly basis, and these guys are all over that.
Thank you. Felix?
Just going back for a minute, after the prerequisites, we're going to level 1, you have to get 6 out of 12. Why not 10 out of 12? 8 out of 12? Why 6 out of 12? Because I think what's
sure how that
happened is,
came about.
this is the same number that has been used in the past,
Correct.
but now it's been refined and refined and refined, where you can get,
I think it's 6 for
Multifamily and 8 for mixed use.
8 for mixed use.
you're
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
But you're correct, though, that
And the credit is not the full credit.
No, okay.
So it's
You
incremental.
feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, it's incremental. Yeah, and that's to Robert's point. I mean, there's one box you don't check, but you're checking all the other boxes. So,
Right. Well, you've taken a lot of the things out of the boxes that were,
well, but a lot of things have been, yeah, but a lot of things have been put in the prerequisites, which were not there before. So you're starting off with a much better building to begin with.
correct.
So, I mean,
Day one, right?
I think Juan is right. The tools that have been implemented in this round, and it's taken a while, but I think it really I think the buildings are going to start off at a better, at a better baseline.
I agree with you. And on the next page after where Robert was on sustainability, I don't think it should be a bonus element. I think it should be more like what the city of Miami, city of Hollywood, Miami Beach does, where it becomes, if you have a project of a certain size, you must do it. But I don't think
It's in that part of the code already, of the Florida Building Code, that you have to have.
There are certain elements of sustainability that are there, but I know what staff is looking for is more of, when you look at all the elements, Robert, they're more of the green, qualifying for green capability.
But I think in the county, for example, every building has to be minimum, is it silver? Sort of, building?
I don't think so. I
I
don't think so, and the reason I'm almost sure that
I
it's
think
not
it is
in the
because-
Florida Building Code, that it has to be in the zoning code, is because we have, 150 jurisdictions in the state of Florida which use the Florida Building Code.
Yeah, so I think, for example, the RRR requires the sustainability is in the zoning element, if you're in the redevelopment district. So, there are some areas that have it already in the zoning.
Right, so it's based on the size of the property that trigger a lead or comparable
Right. Well,
location.
the point I'm trying to make is, I'm just saying, sustainability doesn't look Mediterranean. I'm just saying, pull that out of here and put it somewhere else and still achieve what you want to achieve, like everybody else does. And like I said, all the different jurisdictions have their own different things. But I mean, for me, I want to see something physically that helps the building look more.
don't think it's a prerequisite. I think it's listen, the truth of the matter, in all your components that you're using in the building today, you're going to be
No, I know.
100% or 95% there.
Right, but You go through it all the time, and the thing is that, for example, we're doing a building, and then, we're complying, we have people that will certify the building to a certain level, et cetera. But normally what happens is there's a threshold, as you said, the size of the building. So once you have the size of the building, which you have a bigger carbon footprint, then you go from there. And what I'm just trying to say is that one thing has nothing to do with the other.
I concur with
think
your
it doesn't
analysis
belong.
also.
I don't think it belongs.
It
here.
shouldn't be a part of a med bonus requirement.
It should not, there,
Right,
wow,
different animal.
we're gonna be in agreement. It should not be there.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah.
Twice.
And once was one.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% wholeheartedly.
And then, one of the things that I didn't quite understand is the next one, the number 7 on page 16. Each multi-family zone property shall provide at least 20% of the required ground level landscape open area percentage based upon total lot area as publicly accessible. What is the average size of the required ground level landscaped area, if you
So
can?
multifamily usually is a requirement 25% open space.
So, for example, let's say that we have 100 by 200 feet, 20,000 square feet. 20,000 square feet times 25, 5,000 square feet. 20% of that, which is 1,000 square feet, has to be accessible to the public. That's on 100 by 200 feet, which is a pretty good size, average. Okay, so if you reduce that by what half, that's 500 square feet for public access. Can you explain what the open area as publicly accessible means?
Right, so 25% in our zoning code is a requirement for multifamily for it to be open space.
Right?
20% of that space needs to be in the front yard. So what this is saying is that 20% that's already required to be in the front yard would be publicly accessible.
Okay, because it doesn't give you the location. And this is the point I'm trying to get to. Back in the day, we had green, is this something I said?
Yeah.
Okay. So, back
Felix, if I may, before you continue, I just want to make note for the record that Chip Withers had to leave, and we are now 4 board members here. Thank you. Continue.
Right, thank you. So, back in the day, our setbacks were larger. Now our setbacks have become
10 feet.
minimized. Okay. And now what we're saying is there's going to be public accessibility, to this minimized,
As an option, sure.
as an option.
Right.
So
In areas that don't have a lot of open space.
what I'm trying to figure in my mind is what is the design ramification of putting that in there? In other words, one thing is to say, I did the formula. The thing is to, put it to test. I don't see the advantage.
Is the intent maybe that you don't fence it or enclose it, or is that not allowed in multifamily?
As well, but multifamily usually has limited access to parks, right? There's a lot of people living in the same area, and they only have one large park, so it's allowing your neighbors to use the front area for dog waste or sitting down or,
The point I'm trying to make is, one of your typical buildings, you say, 10 feet is your front setback. Okay, so now I'm doing the calculation. Now I've got 10 feet times 200 feet, that's 2,000 square feet. So by the time you put the driveways in to have access to the parking structure and everything else, what is the public benefit to providing this? Because it's almost like, it becomes almost like a base number. In other words, you already have it. What I'm saying is, how is this providing, that Mediterranean component for level 1 or level 2? What is it? And the reason I struggle with this is, be careful what you wish for. Our setbacks now are so minimal that the people that are occupying these buildings don't have any green space. So therefore, now the big thing is, well, we're going to give them more height if they give us a park. Then the parks are minimized, but the height isn't. So what I can't wrap my head around is, I can't understand how this has become an incentive for the style of the architecture, unless you said, well, they have to be, fountains. There has to be an improvement.
I think the intent maybe is for the larger projects, maybe is the 20% is more applicable, because you mentioned 100 by 200, that's a small,
Yeah.
that's the size of a big house in the Gables.
Right.
100 by 200 is not,
Is nothing.
in my opinion, a commercial property or,
I have more.
But that's a 20,000 square foot lot.
right.
Right.
So you could do it at 20,000. But I think the intent is, when you say the park, to provide more green space, to leave it open. And I think one example is the one building on Valencia here, that they did a green space on the corner.
Yep.
The idea is to leave that open for the public, not necessarily the 100 by 200 strip setback in front of the building.
Right. The proportions of that park are really nice.
Right.
And it's a nice
Well,
pedestrian public area.
And to me, it makes sense because you provide a little, pocket park for the community, for the
Right,
city.
but you're getting to my point. The point is that if you say, it's not just, grass and some shrubbery there, because not much more can go in there, but now if you say, well, we're going to put benches.
Well, I
or
think,
we're going to put.
I think
yeah,
that's
but it's
the
not-
intent. I
it's-
think that's the intent.
it's-
And that's how we amplify the
It's-
look in the Mediterranean and, trellis,
Yeah,
seating area.
But Juan, it's not here.
I know,
Yeah,
the
and
fountains. I understand.
Now, if you're saying we're going to provide the benches, and we're going to provide, the hardscape, and we're going to provide the fountains and things like that, that was the original
And
intent.
again, Felix, I would say that this scenario, if brought to us from an applicant and a substantially large project or larger project than 100 by 200, where they would dedicate and say, hey, I'm using this point for my project, here's my 20% park area, green space, whatever you want to call it, I think the board at that point would pounce and say, hey, what's happening there? Is it just sod? Are you doing fountains? Are you doing a trellis? Is it a covered space? Is it an open space?
We had
Is it a sitting
something
space?
similar that just
Oh.
happened, which was, I think, part of it was with Publix in that park.
On the
Whether
backside,
in the-
on
the back,
Salzito.
correct. And part of it was it to be open space? Was it not to be open space? Did it have statues? Did it not have statues?
Right.
By the same token, I think when we start looking at parks and what's the use and the programming, we have a Parks and Recreation department that also gives input to the city.
Correct.
I just don't know if that's within our purview to state what that park should be, as far as whether it should be a passive park, an active park, or a dog park.
Mr. Chairman, the biggest problem I have with this is that when I look at the computations, et cetera, there's, if you had a fountain and you have it in the right style and you have the right design, it could be very complementary to Mediterranean architecture. Right now, there's nothing. There's nothing that you're getting back that augments and enhances the style of architecture that you're promoting. That's my problem.
So we could add, make sure you're having improvements such as seating or fountains or,
parentheses, fountains,
pedestrian
trellises.
amenities.
Please, not bicycle racks, not this, not
No.
that. It's not intended at anyone. What I'm saying is that, for God's sake, although I am, one of the positive things that you do see at the plaza is that you see amenities at the ground level.
A lot.
That are substantial, that do enhance. So that is something that you can codify to give an improvement and a checkoff, but it should be complementary, not a technical thing such as a bicycle rack
Right.
or just a bench. No, it has to be seating, things that are
Contributing to the Mediterranean
100%.
ambiance.
I
or
mean,
whatever.
Not only to the public realm, because at the end of the day, you want to do something beneficial to the neighborhood. not necessarily, because, with the style of fountain should not be, I prefer, and by the way, typically in a 20,000 square foot lot, you don't have that many options to provide a park. That happens
That's my
on,
point.
on
It
the
has to be a
larger
larger
projects.
project.
But that urban component, many years ago, with the Bank of Coral Gables on Omeria, we provided some little areas in, just enough push and pull where it gives you, and it enhances that. I mean, if you walk through the streets of Granada and you see these little elements throughout there, there's absolutely no doubt. And we're talking about centuries and centuries and centuries of development, which from one people to another people, it just augmented the architecture and complemented it. This doesn't say that. And it should say it, not just, an improvement, but something for the Board of Architects to see and say, this is what we're looking for, to be able to make it a better and a complementary type of thing. And this is at the ground level scale, which is extremely important.
Absolutely, yeah, the groundscape.
Felix, should that park be compatible with the building, or should that park be compatible with the neighborhood? Which, to me, when a developer donates or gives a park or does a park, it's meant to be used by the surrounding neighborhood because it's lacking green space or it's lacking a park.
But also let's say you're walking down the public sidewalk.
Okay.
And, you have your parallel parking and you have your landscaping there. So now you've provided, a beautiful fountain, which is illuminated at night. Now you're walking your dog at night, and you see this, and this is something that is open to the public, and someone could sit down and catch their breath or just enjoy the evening. If you do it in the right style, you feel like it's part of the architecture.
So
Not just taking a piece of artwork and just sticking it there. What you're doing is you're incorporating elements that are part of this particular open space that enhances the quality of that architecture.
So
And it should be compatible.
But
with the
Felix, not necessarily that, I think that each little part should not have a prescriptive, you have to do this, should be, because look at what happened, in a time in Coral Gables, every building had a cupola. Okay? I don't think, I think that the park should be, each part should be,
But this is not
has
a
its
park,
own
Robert.
identity.
I want to be clear. This is not a park.
Yeah, it's not a park.
It's
It's a publicly accessible area, which means that it can't be contained, it's open to the sidewalk, visually, physically, I think that's the intent.
The reason I gave you the description of walking
We're
down
not
the
gonna walk.
public right-of-way sidewalk is because this is where you have the ability of going into the property to make it accessible to the public, making it wider and making it more of a true paseo, not a hallway down the middle of a building, And I think that's important. And, I don't have to explain to you. You know exactly that these elements just enhance the architecture and they could be compatible with it.
But if that's the case, then should the Board of Architects, at the time that they're looking at the building, also be looking at the design of that green space before it goes further?
Well, I mean, this is, the architect has already provided a design for the Board of Architects.
Right, but at what stage, at what point
Oh,
does that park
it
get
could
looked
be at
at?
the.
I think at the BOA level,
At
yeah.
the very beginning,
Yeah, we're very comfortable with that, and we
Okay, but
expect
the
that.
thing is, I-
We don't
I-
want somebody just to show a site plan and not show anything there.
I just
We want to
don't-
see what the intent is, what is the use? What's the activity? What are you trying to do here?
I'm okay with
You
that.
know, and I think that's, again, what the board does.
And that could be easily incorporated into the grand entrance of the building.
Absolutely.
I mean, it could
Absolutely.
be done in so many different ways at so much scale. But I think it's important to be very specific about the improvement that is made to enhance, that experience.
Yes, we can have that in. Yeah.
Okay. And then the open space fund, which is the next one.
The open space fund?
Fund. In other words, here's a check and check it off. I don't think again, that doesn't enhance the architecture in any way, shape, or form, stroking a check to put it into a fund, and God knows if or where it was used. I feel like this, like impact fees. Every time we pull a permit, we pay hundreds of thousands, millions sometimes, for impact fees. We don't know where the money's going. Where's the improvement? Where's the enhancement? Where's the offset? So I don't think that this should be an item. I think staff could come up with a better item than this, in my opinion. And I think that, contributions, for things like this, that could happen, at a commission level, but that has nothing to do with the Board of Architects or the style of the building or the bonuses, in my opinion.
I'm assuming this particular item is there for the project that doesn't have the availability of the open space because of the site constraints.
No, they still have to meet their open space
They
requirements.
still have to do this, so this is
Yeah.
in excess of that.
Exactly, yes.
Right, and again, it's just, I just don't see the checking off of this element to enhance, for a mid bonus.
What do you think the reason that it was put there in the first place was?
I don't want to.
Yeah.
You've been around the city a long time.
No, I don't want to go there. I think, look, for me, one of the subjects that has been continually a issue for me is the pad, right? So the pad was put in for a certain reason, which was specifically the Douglas Entrance Project. And then for dozens of years, it wasn't touched. Now a pad is used for everything, and therefore variances are not required. So you don't have to go to the Board of Adjustment for variances because you're using a pad. The pad was put in specifically to be able to do something like redo the Douglas entrance and save it the way it was. But now it's become like a normal thing. So what was the reason? That was the reason on that specific subject. What is the reason here? I think that we have an issue in the city that has to do with the lack of parks that we have. But that's a different issue. That should be an issue that should be a discussion by the commission, in the Parks and Recreation Board or whatever. But I don't think this has anything to do with the style of the architecture, Mr. Chairman.
But when a check is written for that, to check that off, do we know where does the funds go?
So there is a parks acquisition fund that it would go into, and it'd probably be earmarked that it came from a med bonus criterion to be
What can it
used
be used
adjacent
for?
to multifamily or mixed-use districts. That's the intent.
And again, the question is, what did you do to improve that and make it a better Mediterranean-style building?
But aren't you then using those funds to improve other neighborhoods or other areas that actually need it?
I agree conceptually with what you're talking about, but it's like sustainability. The one thing has nothing to do with the style of the architecture. It has nothing to do. The previous one, if you do the improvements, et cetera, then you're talking about something completely different.
I understand, and it doesn't improve the quality of the project,
Indirectly, it does.
but it does indirectly.
It improves the city.
It improves the
overall
quality of life.
context, the broader context. I mean, I
So
think
there
that's
is
the
a,
answer. If that's valid or not, that's what it's doing.
Again,
There's an improvement down the road somewhere, maybe across the
it may
street.
not be project specific, but
Not specific to
right,
this guy,
but now,
but
we're not talking about the style of architecture. See,
Oh, I agreed.
And
Agreed.
that's remember, med bonus, what's the outcry, med bonus for med architecture?
right.
Now it's like, we put money in a fund and you get to check this off. Has nothing to do with the style of the architecture,
But it's a vehicle to get funds
without a doubt. And
in areas where it's needed.
Kind of like the art in public places. I mean,
Yeah,
you
to me-
charge
to
1%
me, it
and that
doesn't
goes into
bother.
a fund and that gets put somewhere. It may not be on your project, it may not be on your block, but it amplifies and beautifies the city.
I'm glad you said, I'm sorry, I'm glad you said that. We have a tree fund in this city. I know the amount of money that's in the tree fund. My question is, where are the trees going? Where's the accountability for that? So the point is, here we're discussing is the same thing as if we put something for additional trees. Well, wait a minute. What does that have to do with the style of architecture? Nothing. I mean, this is, the Board of Architects is looking for, give me tools to be able to make sure that the architecture is really good and it's really Mediterranean inspired, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Has nothing to do with, putting money away to do something somewhere, which God knows where. And it goes back just the same as the impact fees.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, writing a check is simple, but it doesn't do anything for this project.
I think
Again, I guess it's not a requirement. It's one of the ones that you may or may not use.
Correct.
Gives somebody an
Gives the check mark.
alternative that may not have any other options. I don't know. Again, I'm not justifying it. I think I understand your point. I don't think, I do understand your point, but,
Well, point well taken.
yeah.
Let's move on.
Okay. The next page, the sidewalks, plazas, and courtyards, page 17, number 9. The sidewalks, plazas, and courtyards, minimum of 25%. It kind of trails off. Did you mean to say, can you say of what? 25% of what?
So we can add back in the total ground level paving area or paving service, if that's needed, that's fine.
So it says sidewalks, plazas, and courtyards, minimum of 25% of the lot area of the required
Well, you can
green
see the area
space.
that was crossed out, so it's of total ground level paving surface.
Oh, it should not have been crossed out.
Yes, you can see that, right? Yeah.
Okay, so it should have stayed in there.
Fine, you can put it back in.
Got it.
So that was a strike-o.
Yes,
instead of
the
a typo.
strikeout was unintentional.
Strike-o. Strike-o instead of a typo.
Now, this is right away, or is this public property? Private property.
Private property.
Private property, right?
Yes.
So why is Public Works the decision-making factor and not BOA?
I think this is everything, it's a sidewalk, sidewalks, plazas, and courtyards. Plazas and courtyards are typically in private property, sidewalks are outside, in public right away.
That's why I'm asking.
I agree with the city architect. I think it should be a co-approval.
I mean, if it's a plaza, if it's a courtyard, it's mine. It's in my domain. If it's in the right of way, I give it up to Public Works all the time. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I have no choice.
And the reason I don't either is because, here we go again, street lighting, all these different things. Come on. I mean, it's just, we have the BOA. I don't think anyone in Public Works is going to say, no, we don't want to hear their opinion. I think that's the best thing we could do, is add them in there too. So,
That should be under the jurisdiction of the BOA? Pavement, hardscape?
back in the day, it was in there. So,
And typically it is. I think when you go in for, for a project, you're showing,
you're right.
all the plazas and everything,
Hey,
I think
I think it's probably there for the sidewalks.
It's us. We actually have a requirement for material board.
Yeah.
That has to have physical samples of what they're proposing.
That's right.
So again, that's already.
It's already there.
Already included in the deal.
Yeah.
We have that.
But the way this is written, this
No, I know, that's why I
this is
brought
what
it up.
happens when you add things and you add things and add things. You make one change and then all of a sudden it doesn't make sense later on, and then someone makes a wild interpretation.
Yeah, no, that's why I mentioned it.
And by the way, the reason the city has Coral Gables beige sidewalks is not because of a civil engineer, it's because of the original architects that designed the city. So if you go down to number 10, public art. So when you look at public art, we have the art in public places already there, right? So why would you add public art there as one of the needed requirements when it's already part of the statutes that we have to comply with public art.
Can I chime in on?
I think the logic is the arts and public places domain is the artwork, and the Board of Architects domain is the context around the artwork and where it goes and how it's situated, how it's placed. I think
And
that's the logic.
just to be clear, the Art and Public Places requirement is payment of the Art and Public Places fee. And so an applicant can seek a waiver of the fee by then including the artwork in their project, which has to go through the process for including the artwork on the project. But you can just pay the fee and not have the public art on your project. So
Right,
this would be if you, I guess, to satisfy that one, it would be you have public art incorporated into your project.
Into the
So
design,
it would
right?
not, you wouldn't be allowed to use the fee as a check mark.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's what the intent of that is, unless Jennifer has
I
other,
mean, it's existing
other
language.
context for this,
whatever-
yeah.
However it's being
For me,
applied
once you
today.
And this is the existing language as well. so
Right,
to
I
be
mean,
clear.
once you see public, it seems like all bets are off there. Right?
But this may allow, like, what you were saying about artwork or a fountain or something that blends better into the project.
Be integrated into
To be
that. That's
integrated
what we
into it.
want.
All right.
We're trying to get cohesion between our
correct.
public places and the BOA.
Because if they want to use this, even if they want to pay for art in public places and they use this check mark, I assume they also have to use public art within their project.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And let me just jump up to B for a minute. Expanded sidewalks widths beyond the property line. You mean within private property, correct?
This is beyond.
Where?
If you look at B.
Oh,
then
again, existing language, so
Yeah.
I guess within the private property.
Expanded sidewalk width,
widen the
Maybe within the
sidewalk.
right of way or something?
Within the private property line? Where is this supposed to be?
I think it's within the private property line, I'm assuming is what it means.
We
to
can
make
go
it- to
back
widen
and
the
see.
sidewalk.
Yeah, where the
I'm not sure how
context
it's
for
being
this.
applied now.
Because it's existing language,
Right.
so.
Would you review that? So that we can see where,
Yeah, widths within the
what
private
the
property
intent
line.
is and where it came from or so
Because
forth?
I would think that, if they could look at the sidewalks outside or what do you call it? What did you call it? Not a bicycle lane, you called it a, what lane?
Mobility.
Mobility.
Mobility lane, right? Where do you draw the line of saying this is part of the things that belong to this building?
And maybe the intent there is maybe like a plaza or something internal to the property that kind of bleeds out into the public area.
Well, G is there, it said water features, fountains, or similar water features, ground and/or wall mounted. But anyway, I just wanted to make sure, because then the bottom paragraph, above amenities shall be consistent in design and form with the City of Coral Gables Public Works Manual. In addition to the Board of Architects approval.
Yeah, I mean, they're already reviewing this. This is,
No.
No,
The way that it says it is,
These,
the last thing I need is for someone to say, okay, we have a concrete pole, this is going to be the concrete pole, and it's in the manual. You
I
could have
see,
it in the
okay.
manual. You need to have BOA say yes or no.
right.
Let's help out the civil engineers a little bit.
You don't want engineers making all the decisions.
That's the fear. I hate to say it, but that's the reality. They look at things differently with different criteria. And
That's
so do
correct.
we. We look at it,
Right.
again, from the perspective of the aesthetics and not the technical.
Right, but here,
information.
you're looking at it to be able to give someone a
And
bonus.
again, going back to item B, should we say instead of expanded sidewalk, expanded pavement? So we don't, I'm not sure if a bigger, wider sidewalk is better than pavers or something more decorative or more ornate,
But
or no? I don't know. I don't know if I want to look at a 20-foot wide sidewalk in front of my building. I'd rather see a 10-foot sidewalk that's the right-of-way pedestrian area, and then there's pavement that's contributing to the aesthetics of the building and the site, the project, the look. I'm just worried about the word sidewalk, because that implies the Coral Gables beige standard sidewalk with the score lines at 5 feet. And do we want to look at that when it's
20 feet.
30 feet wide? Is that a positive thing, or is that something that's just there? That's my perspective on that.
I agree.
I think the word pavement opens it up to interpretation. It could be concrete, it could be pavers, it could be some other material that would be conducive to a nicer product.
Are you allowed today to put pavers within the sidewalk on a project?
On the public right of way?
On the public
No,
right of way?
We don't, that's typically Public Works domain. Again, we
Yeah,
have this
and
argument all the
that's
time.
very difficult because.
I would
then you
love to
have-
do that, but they don't allow me,
Yeah,
and they win all the time.
So if a project has a driveway or something that protrudes out, for example, in residential areas,
They have
you
a
can
covenant.
do pavers
So
as
we're
long
allowed
as
to
you
do it in
maintain.
residential with covenants.
Correct, with covenants and insurance and so
Subject to,
forth.
it's a Public Works review process.
Okay,
Yeah.
but in commercial, you're not allowed to do it?
I think you're allowed to do it.
It's Public Works
Probably the
would
same
have to.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Covenant that they have to write.
So then if you're allowed to do it, are you saying that if you have pavers in the approach and you have pavers in the driveway, the part that's the sidewalk
It has to go through.
has to go through? It can't
I
be
think that happened at
continuous?
Gables Village. I think we had that same discussion at Gables Village where they had pavers in the driveway and we recommended pavers in the approaches. So now we have a paver,
Concrete.
6 feet of concrete, and then paver. And I said, no, make it all paver. No,
Right.
you can't do that. It's got to be concrete, blah, blah, blah. So
Got it.
I lost that battle.
Essentially, it would be
Okay.
subject to Public Works review. Yeah.
So the next item, number 11, on the pass-throughs, the only mention is there's no mention of height. And one of the things about these, buildings and the paseos and all this stuff is, you feel like you're in a dungeon sometimes, right?
That again, Felix, is under the purview of the board. The board is all over that when they look at the projects. I mean, again, other projects
I
have been
don't-
built, and you're right, there's
Right.
8-foot ceilings on these paseos that look terrible. But I can tell you that in today's world, and going back maybe 4 or 5 years, that's been heavily scrutinized by the board. in
Yeah,
terms
because
of
people are seeing what was
width
built.
And the height, and the scale, and what the ambiance is there. And so we work on that. I don't know if you want to dictate that here, or maybe give a minimum, but it's well under the scrutiny of the board.
So, let's see.
Right.
The last item,
Yeah, that's part of that strategy is a proportional analysis is in another part of the code. When you have an opening in a building, there's a certain width and height proportion and relationship that has to be maintained. So I think that's inherent already, but if you want to fine tune it some more,
the only thing here, number 12, which is the last item before level 2, is that when applicable, complete the undergrounding of existing and new overhead utilities, et cetera. I want to bring up Publix for just a minute. Undergrounding was required, but then the question became, adjacent to the building, 3 blocks down, it gets to the point, I remember those people were shell-shocked because it was not just adjacent to their property, it was like going down the street. So
Again, that's Public Works.
I just, no, this is, it says, underground utilities. This is one of the things you could check off, underground utilities. When applicable, complete, one of the few things that has nothing to do with the style of architecture that I agree with because you want to get those wires down and all that, right? So it says, when applicable, complete the undergrounding of the existing and new overhead utilities along all public roads adjacent to the building site. I think that's the way it should be written, but how did we request so much more from Publix on the undergrounding there?
Because that was a plug benefit, that was just by staff. So they had a pad, and remember they had the
Okay.
south side of the street.
Now I understand.
That didn't have any windows or doors facing the street.
Publix are we talking about?
The one over here.
Lejeune.
Right.
Okay, the new one. Okay.
But there's some cases where projects, Public Works requires that the utilities extended beyond.
Yeah, like water mains, fire lines. I mean,
But-
that's done
but-
all the time.
No,
Yeah,
fire-
but
fire line is
Juan,
required.
I did a project that the water main extension was a mile away.
Yeah, that's.
And that's the burden of the developer?
Yeah.
Really?
That's the price you pay for building big projects. That's just the nature of the beast here in the city.
Well, one of the things
We don't
is that.
control that. That's a
when-
negotiation that's
No,
done.
even on Glenn Pratt's project, there was an issue of a bulb out,
I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
whether, that was required at the last, not the last minute, but, at the end, and they were kind of squirrely about it because they didn't know what it was gonna cost,
It's
and
huge. It's a
that.
huge impact.
Right, so one of those things that, when you're working, with the developer, when you're working, with the applicant, kind of, in my opinion, is kind of be straightforward about it. And by the way, like I said, I was in Boston recently, all their mobility lanes are green. Every single one is painted green. And I don't think we have it standardized yet here. But just so you know, Boston has them green everywhere. I took pictures of them.
Well, that's what if I recall, at the last meeting we had, we were talking about standardizing, suggesting to the commission to standardize a mobility lane.
Yeah, the bike
Yeah, we
lanes.
wanted, we were
It's
thinking about
bikes,
mobility because in today's society, it's more than bikes that.
Right.
But you got scooters, you got anything else. But it should be standardized, so one project doesn't have a green, the other one has a yellow or somebody so forth, it should be looked at.
So Felix, I guess your question is the sentence correct the way it is, or do you want to modify it?
No, I think it's correct the way it is, but I wanted to ask staff because of, a couple recent applicants where, they,
Extended beyond the site, the building site?
well, I mean, by the time it gets here, it becomes a condition, and then, the applicant is flat-footed because they,
Anticipate.
yeah, and they were, I don't know if it was a reasonable reason for them to have heartburn or not, but they were definitely not happy. And the point is that I want to make sure, and after staff explained that because of the pad, they could ask, and I get it, but now I understand. So the wording here is consistent with that. And Mr. Chairman, that basically is level one. On level two, I promise I have just a few comments. And one of the things that we didn't discuss prior to is we kind of discussed it the last time, and that was the best practice manual on page 6, number 1.
Page 6 or page 19, number 1?
Your PDF page, number 6, number 1, which is the prerequisites table. So in here, it says on the upper right-hand portion of the page, precedents appropriate to the proposed building shall be referred visually as provided in the best practice manual or documented in the Historic American Building Survey. I think that it should be online, not only for the applicant, the owner, the Board of Architects, everybody, the public.
Yes.
So,
Currently
is
it's online. Yeah. So it's on coralgables.com/medterranean design. You'll find it there.
it is there.
Yes.
And then also,
Before we continue, if we can, for the record, let us show that Javier Salmon, board member, has joined us.
I
Thank you for coming.
were you able to put up all your shutters?
Luckily, I don't have to, but I was at a commission meeting, so it went long.
So I'd like to just jump forward to page 24 of the Coral Gables Mediterranean Architectural Design, A. So I said that, and I said it publicly the last time, that there should be pictured examples and put on the city's website of each one of these examples.
Yes,
And
that will
I-
also be provided on the same website, coralgables.com/interior design. All these pictures of all these buildings will be there, if not plans accompanying with them.
Okay.
Elevations, to be able to help architects.
Perfect, thank you very much.
You know, also, last time, Brett Gillis, a resident, I had a suggestion
That's right.
for including another building or two as good examples, and
That we looked at?
Yeah, so that was discussed with the Board of Architects. They reviewed that image and other images that he suggested take out and remove.
Yeah, we went through that
They-
whole list, and we
They
vetted
like
the-
these lists, yeah.
the Brett Gillis projects, the projects that were there, and I think we came to the conclusion of this is the final list. Yeah, I don't recall if Brett's project made it or not. I know they looked at it, they discussed it. Do you remember?
Palm Beach
There was a Palm
example.
Beach project?
What's it called?
Can staff?
Palm Beach Town Hall? Is that it?
No,
the
it's not
chair?
on here.
Oh, it's not in here. We did look at it.
Javier?
We did review it and
Juan,
present.
can't you, as an architect, come in with your own example for review?
You can do whatever you want as an applicant, yeah.
Yes,
These are
exactly.
just-
These are just suggestions, but, you know,
We agree
the architect
all
might
agree
find
to-
something different he can come in with, so.
Absolutely, you can bring it whatever you feel is appropriate. You know, the board will judge it and you'll hear the answer.
Right.
whether it's
but regarding
appropriate or
the
not.
examples in Brett Gillis, I mean, we should get back to him and, or, you know, acknowledge what he suggested. Do you know if that was included, his?
Yeah, so that was the same list that we had gone through back in May, I believe,
Yeah.
with the Board of
Yeah, that
Architects.
was months ago.
Okay, and they're included in here?
Not all of them were included because the board did not feel comfortable with all of them.
Right.
Okay, I
Board
think, I
review-
think he only suggested two.
Could you be kind enough to write him a response?
Sure.
From, you know, coming from the BOA through staff and,
Yeah.
you know, because he did take the time to
Yeah.
do that, and I think it's important. And the other thing is that the only objection I have is the San Sebastian apartments. I know that they're simplified. They are historic. The proportions are there. That is part of the history of the cardboard college. As you know, the University of Miami was literally on the site of what is today the Coral Gables War Memorial Youth Center, and the housing was that.
Right.
And I think that it may not be the most ornate, it may not have been, you know, blessed at that time, but I think that the historical context of that building is extremely important. As simple as it is, you know, it doesn't have the push in and out, et cetera, but it does have several
And I think
elements.
the board looked at that and had that discussion, and we understand historically the significance of the building. But I think the board looked at it from an aesthetic perspective and the characteristics of what's there, and deemed it that it wasn't, I don't want to say appropriate, but we felt that there was other projects or buildings that were more impactful in terms of showing someone what we expect and what the city wants. And we felt that the St. Sebastian wasn't up to that par in terms of design affinity or design aesthetics, wasn't at the top of its game. Let me put
Well,
it
of
that
course,
way.
and
So again, that was a decision
No.
collectively by the board.
Right.
We voted,
Yeah,
you know, as a board, and some people,
keep in mind that that building survived the 1926 hurricane, but the cardboard college did not.
yeah.
So, you know, I'm just saying that.
I'd be happy to discuss it with the board again, but we went through that, and we vetted it.
Right,
everybody
well, and
voted.
the reason, as minimalistic as it could, you know, it is, based on the times and the whatever, in all sincerity, I think it's also going to be important in the future to be able to preserve that building historically. I think that's something that maybe the board was not, you know, calculating that. And,
it not
and
historic
I
right now?
I also had a separate conversation after the meeting with the chair and,
Historical?
no, with the BOA chair.
Oh, BOA, okay.
Yeah, and she truly believed that it was something that it wouldn't hurt to have it on the list. That's my opinion. Everybody else here is.
No, and again, we've had this discussion at board level and during meetings, you know, we have projects that come in at a residential scale that are historically designated, and I want to say this in a proper way without hurting anybody's feelings, but some historical projects are significant and important because of the historical value of what happened there. And some projects are aesthetically important. And I think the charge of the board, again, is always aesthetics and what it conveys and what it portrays and what it looks like. And we felt that the St. Sebastian didn't really meet that standard. That, again, and it was a mixed vote. It wasn't unanimous. We voted, I think it was 4-3 or 5-2. I forget what the vote count, I have a record of it, but we debated it, we discussed it thoroughly, we brought up the issue of the historical significance of the building, and it should be there, but aesthetically, what does it convey to a developer or an architect that's trying to understand the essence of Mediterranean design? And we felt that that particular project did not meet that standard. And so, based on the list that we had, we felt that that one was not at that level. So we opted not to vote for it, but I can always go back to the board and reiterate. If you feel that that's significant, then I would happy to entertain another discussion. That's not a problem.
Okay.
But that's what transpired.
And as you said, these are examples which are, I think, important to everyone. They're examples. And I just, I could just envision sometime in the future someone saying, we're going to knock it down, and even the BOA threw it in the garbage can. So it's going to be on you, Juan.
No, we didn't throw it in the garbage can. We just felt it wasn't to the level of the other.
No, obviously.
Projects. It's
Obviously.
a different budget, a different.
And again,
different
once you put
program.
it into proper perspective with the cardboard college, I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, we did our job. We looked at it, we vetted it, we talked about it, we argued about it. And at the end of the day, the decision was made and it didn't pass, it didn't make the vote. So
Right.
that's all I can tell you at this point. But I'd be happy to do it again if that's
Appreciate it.
important to you.
Appreciate it.
It's not like we missed it. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I
We
got
didn't over,
No, I got it.
we did focus on it.
I got it. In level 2 bonuses on page 19, do you have any example on the minimum open space? It says the total square footage received from the building lot coverage increase is provided as publicly accessible street level open space and land. Do you have an example of that, like a?
We could provide that. That's fine.
Because for me, it was difficult to understand.
Yeah, so basically, right now, there's no maximum building lot coverage. And we feel like that's kind of unfair. There should be some kind of benefit for the public to be able to maximize your building to the setbacks. So in exchange, try and allocate some of that land, right, for the public good. But yeah, we can provide that study. That's fine.
Thank you. And then the minimum square footage, B, the minimum square footage of open space shall be 400 square feet. How was that determined? Just so happens that 400 feet was done in the original one 40 years ago. Was that like pulled out of there kind of thing?
I think 400 square feet is also the minimum amount for open space. Maybe it's 500 actually, now I'm thinking about it. It's 400 or 500, so we can double check that, make sure it's consistent with the minimum open space.
I'm just trying to understand where the number came from, and how it's applied. On page 25, B, the multifamily residential density bonus is 25%.
So that's existing language right now. Let's taking it out of the I think it was table 3 and putting it as a standard provision in a code.
Okay.
So language is the same.
And then C, exclusion from height.
That's also right now in, I think it's
Right.
being relocated from one of the tables in the code.
So, talking about the CBD, the last three lines there, it seems like it was, says, shall exceed a height of more than 25 feet above the roof. Such exclusion shall be subject to the provisions that no structure shall exceed a height of more than 25 feet above the roof, except for mixed-use buildings in the CBD where no such structure shall exceed more than one-third of the allowable total height.
Right, so that's right now existing language in the med bonus.
Right, so let's talk about that for a minute. So what is the tallest building in the CBD today?
Actually, it's the Codina building,
5 feet.
205.
205.
It's
So,
not there yet, though, but yes, it will be.
Oh, it's pretty close.
yeah. So if you do the math, the additional height is,
1/3,
that's a lot.
80 feet,
75 feet.
70 feet,
I think
70.
I think that's a mistake. I don't say you made a mistake. I say this board should consider that. I mean, that is, in my opinion, that's unbelievable. See, and this is, again, nothing personal, but I mean, this is like, well, we copy, we paste, we copy, we paste, but let's think about what it looks like. You take a 200-foot high building, 205, and then you add another 1/3 on top of it, you're going to minimize the Biltmore. That's,
I think the calculation was that it would still be underneath the Biltmore, which I think is 315 feet or somewhere around there.
I'm sorry. Let's throw in there now, just for conversation, Live Local Act. How is that going to look with a third on top of that?
Live Local Act can only go up to the maximum height we have in the city, though.
Within a mile?
Within the city,
Within the
yes.
jurisdiction? But I think that the proportion of taking this and adding a third on top of it, I find it offensive. I don't want to be, I could tell a joke, but I'd get in trouble. But I don't want to be on Chrome Avenue and be able to see the top of one of these buildings in Coral Gables. It's ridiculous. There's no need for it architecturally in proportion. Robert, am I missing something?
Now, when you analyze it like that, 1/3 of the total height may be more than you need to.
Right.
I don't know what that number is, but before it was 25 feet, right?
No, right now that 1/3 language is already in the med bonus. It's already allowed.
I mean, I don't know. I wish, well, Javier and Peter could opine based on this as architects. What exactly can you then do within that 1/3 of the distance, height? What are your
Structural features, towers, it's not habitable space.
Cupola.
Very tall cupola.
I mean, do you need to be 1/3? I mean, I don't know. Honestly, no. To answer, you don't need to have.
So this is only an exception for the CBD, right?
Correct.
Yes.
The normal requirement is a maximum of 25 feet above the roof
Right.
line.
But
Which I've heard is very limiting.
think about this one. So now, in the CBD area, you have Alhambra, you have Miracle Mile, you have Ponce. Those are the three widest arteries in the CBD area. Now, you're going to be on the interior lots, interior right-of-ways, which are substantially smaller. What on earth are you accomplishing by putting something that's disproportionate on top of the building, which makes absolutely no sense?
Why
I'm
is this in
assuming-
here to begin with?
The Board of Architects is going to review it, so if it seems absurd, if the lot is small and it's a third and it looks like it's out of proportion, I'm assuming the Board of Architects is going to opine on
The
that.
board will chime in on it right away.
But wait a minute. No. I think that it should be limited to what it is everywhere else.
25 feet.
Why would it be
I agree.
different in the CBD?
I don't see that.
Is it to stroke somebody's ego? I don't get it.
No, I think
I
that's
don't
just a
see-
leftover sentence from years gone by.
Well, I think this
Is what it
is
is.
why we're here, right?
I know that's not something that we discussed or requested or
I mean, the 25 feet of this area, if you look at Alan Morris's new project,
Alan Morris's project, if you count the, above the 114 feet, how much was it?
I think it's 143 total, or something like that.
No, it's 190 total,
190,
180 something
No,
total.
which one? The one on Alhambra?
the new one.
the new one that's
The
going up.
rooftop,
No, the
That's
new
not
one is not
190.
190.
No. The one,
no.
we're talking about the one on Ponce and
Down to
University.
10 stories?
yeah, the new one.
So
Yeah, the new one.
the court reporter can't take this down if everyone's talking over each other.
No, guarantee that's not one. He came originally at 190 and we rejected it and went back.
Went
Go to
down.
10 stories?
I thought it was 109
No,
or
no,
something.
no, it's like,
Like 130, isn't it? Don't you know, don't you? Okay.
Okay, I thought it was 115, but the top,
Yeah.
you think it was 120?
With everything on top of it, down
Oh,
to
it's
the-
186 or something, yes, with the architectural features,
No.
There's 186?
yes,
this is
with a tower.
No.
I know he's got a lot up there.
Proportionally, it goes high,
So-
yes.
that's
That's
not
150 feet.
190, no. Not at all.
No way, no how.
Look it up.
No.
No, I remember that was the discussion.
Guys, look,
On that
in order to
building.
move forward, whatever it is,
I say.
I agree with Felix on this one. that
I'm
I don't think there's a
recommending
need
it,
for a third.
it's 25 feet, end of story. in
Yeah,
my
let's
opinion.
get rid of it.
okay, so that's
you
your
for bringing that
recommendation? Let's, Felix,
I got one last point, and that was.
no, let's move forward, yeah.
It depends on the project.
So we get rid of
Guys,
this, right?
Yeah,
Let's-
the third is out the door, right. The third is out the door.
All right, so the recommendation is
25
25
foot
feet right
fixed
now
period,
from
end of story.
That may not be sufficient depending on the project.
It depends on it's a
But
particular.
not,
to the
I agree
design.
with you, 1/3 is excessive.
Okay.
But maybe 25 feet, depending on the project, may not be
Honest-
sufficient.
Honestly, it should be a function of the right-of-way in front of it and the lot area that they have. Because, I mean, 25 feet may be nothing if you have an entire block.
Yeah.
But it would be significant if you have a 50 by 100-foot lot, you know?
In my opinion, I think the BOA should help staff in coming up with the right proportion and the right maximum on the thing. I don't have a problem with that, but I think 1/3 is absurd.
I completely agree.
Okay.
And all I'm saying is it should be tied, it should go back to the Board of Architects and come up with a formula based on the frontage and the lot area that they're looking at developing, so that it works out as a function and nobody has to break their head about it.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a product of the building, the design, the mass.
Maybe
No,
25 feet.
Juan, I'm talking about frontage.
Yeah.
And the footprint of the building working together to achieve that maximum.
Yeah.
All right? And it needs to be some sort of function.
Yeah. But I think the 1/3 is mind-blowing. And then the last page, 27, Article 16. Why was that added, the term precedent means a building structure element?
Not everyone knows what a precedent means, and since it's mentioned a lot in our tables, we had to define it so that we understand it's example of a building that's used by an architect or whatever the definition is. A building structure element of a design that's used by an architect.
It wasn't
Not everyone knows
previously,
what a precedent is.
it wasn't previously defined, so
Right.
now it's defined.
Right, but I think it's, when you look at the way it's used legally, it's, and you look at this definition, it's kind of, maybe there should be another,
Architectural precedent, you mean?
Yeah, I think the definition defines what it is. We're not talking about a legal precedent, we're talking about a building structure element of design that is used by an architect as an example or guide, so that it's clear now.
so so the precedent, you mean, are the examples that you
Yes.
have there, right? Of the pictorial ones that?
Yes.
Okay. And in my opinion, I think it should be architectural historic precedents, for the definition, and maybe the way to simplify it is to say, precedent as used in the zoning code.
This is in the definition section, so that's why this would be plugged into the definition section of the zoning code.
No, I understand, but what I'm trying to say is that it's an architectural historic precedent, correct? Or am I wrong?
Architectural precedent. I'm not sure about using the word historic if they're not visiting historic buildings.
But, right,
Because there's
but-
plenty of buildings that are in here, they're not historic.
You just said that the Coral Gables Mediterranean architectural design, all applicants' approval shall be required to satisfy all include the proportional systems as defined in the best practices. Where's the word used precedent there?
It's used, I think, in the prerequisites, if I remember correctly,
Okay?
the precedent study.
Because
Number
it-
2, precedents.
where is
Training
that?
precedents. Number 2 on page 6, under the prerequisites. The title of its precedents goes on, Mediterranean precedents appropriate for the proposed building. It uses the word precedents throughout this section.
So this is an area that when we were reviewing these changes and we were going through and making changes, we saw there was a need to define the term, so now we have this would provide a definition for the term.
Yeah, I'm reading that. Precedents appropriate for proposed buildings shall be referenced visually as provided in the best practices manual. But that's,
So when they present to the board, they'll have a sheet or a board that has their different precedents, their example buildings that they're using details and designs from in their proposed building.
no, I understand. I'm just saying is that when you look at the definition, you look at this, I mean, I think there's a leap between the two. I don't think it's articulated the way you were intending to use it, in my opinion. I just think that maybe either, say, if you say,
Are you concerned about the term? Are you concerned about the term that we're using, precedent, or the definition?
No, I'm concerned with, for example, here, this is a perfect example on page 6. Precedents appropriate based on the best practices manual. That best practices manual and the examples of the buildings on page 24A, right? All those examples, I think that's what you're intending to be the precedent. But when you go back to the best practices manual and the Historical American Building Survey, none of those are precedents.
Those example of those 20-something buildings are going to be in the best practice manual and diagram to show what
You're going to
roofs
put
are.
them in there.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I missed that because I've been asking for that. Okay, so it'll be in the best practice.
Yes, just like today.
So then if you go back to the definition, precedent refers to the building structures or elements as shown in the best practice manuals.
I don't think it's not limited to that, right, Jennifer? The intent was not to limit it just to that, because precedent
Yes,
doesn't
we may
just
not
mean the
have-
buildings.
Yeah, we may not have every single 26 buildings in the best practice manual. We will definitely try to, because right now we only have 8 buildings in there, and we're going to add more.
Mr. Chairman, in order not to dam this up, I'm going to, I would like to just take a look at it and maybe bring it up the next time and possibly come up with some verbiage that both staff and the BOA and legal can agree to the thing.
That's fine.
And I just want it to be simple for, the architects and the developers and the land use attorneys that are using it to everybody be on the same page.
So your concern is that it's not simplified enough, or it doesn't point To a specific,
I don't think it's clear enough.
Okay.
I don't think it's clear enough. And I think it can be made clear, and it, you know, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, I'm sure staff welcomes your input on that.
Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Javier, any, I know you didn't get the
I
benefit.
didn't get the benefit of the previous discussion. So far, the comments that I've heard are similar to the ones I had, so I'm assuming that those were, the ones I had were incorporated.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if you could explain to Javier what we're doing for the next meeting.
At the next meeting, since we didn't have enough people here at this meeting, there were several options that we decided. Either one was to go ahead and
He left at 5:30.
to just go ahead and cancel the meeting, which we didn't. The other one was to proceed with the meeting and not necessarily make a recommendation at this time, because we didn't have a complete board. And the members that missed, they'd be able to look at the minutes and see what was talked about.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The question that I have is, if you look at page 6, which would be under, let me just go there. Page 6, under the
Prerequisite?
the prerequisites table, correct. Item number 3, exclusions from height, the following shall be excluded. Everything there is,
It's been relocated,
Striked
so
out.
we just read about, yes.
okay, can we go to
That's
where
where the
it's been?
1/3 of the allowable total building height in CBD, that's where all that came from. That's why it's struck through.
Okay, and can you guide me to where you relocated it, please?
It's in past all the tables, because it's a general provision under C, on page 26.
That's the section we were just discussing,
Okay, I
about the
didn't-
1/3, et cetera. That language was already in
Okay,
there,
that
but in the
language is
table.
in there. Okay, perfect.
We cleaned it up.
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, everything's been really covered that we spoke about. I mean, Juan, really your input, coming here really helped us out to clarify a lot, and honestly, and Gus coming here to clarify a lot of misconception that was with the Board of Architects, I think shed a lot of light. For me, it did, and I'm sure for the other board members.
If, Mr. Chair, if you allow me, going back to that clarification that Gus made, and I want to avoid further, or maybe perhaps manage expectations a little bit. We discussed how it would be appropriate for the Board of Architects to look at the compatibility and determine that a particular design is not compatible at the proposed height. But I want to just make it clear, I don't think it would be appropriate for the Board of Architects to say, in this particular location, a 100-foot building could never be compatible. It would be this design that's at 100-foot height is not compatible. This design. There could be perhaps another design that would be. I just want to make sure that nuance is clear.
Yeah.
It is. And Gus made it actually very clear with his examples and so forth. Thank you. Any other comments from the board on this at this time? So, go ahead, Felix.
I was just going to say, I'd like to make a motion to continue this meeting till the next appropriate meeting to be able to have any additional comments from the board members that weren't here for a portion of this meeting, and then be able to discuss it and then make a motion at that time.
You've got all of our comments written down and the recommendations that were made and the concerns. Okay, good. I mean, Jennifer's really been doing a great job of keeping track of it, striking out, keep going. I mean,
And I think this was a very good move to have a special meeting specifically for this, because, you can't be distracted by other applications or other issues. This is too big a discussion.
When will the next meeting take place?
October 9.
2 weeks. Are you going to be here?
I may not be here.
I may not be here.
Oh, okay. Can we explore the possibility of moving that meeting, or you need 30 days to do that?
We
We
advertised
mailed notice.
and we mailed notice.
Okay, you mailed notice, okay.
Or you may continue with the meeting, but you may want to move this
Right, and then what we could do is possibly incorporate the other comments from the members that were not here.
Correct.
And then you guys can catch
Well,
up and then go over to that.
I mean, the members that were not here today was Julio,
Right,
And Chip missed some.
Missum, and Javier.
Miss, yeah. almost.
Okay, and I guess we would have to, I was gonna say I would put on the table my vote already, just in case I'm not here, but
I don't think you can do that.
First of all, we don't have a motion
Because
even, so
otherwise-
you could not do that.
because otherwise you're gonna be, when are we gonna
In November.
conclude? That's a long time.
So we have some projects that are in the pipeline that it would be nice to be able to apply these new Mediterranean-related regulations to.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know if we could wait till November.
May I make a suggestion? Can we possibly have a second meeting as we had today, in between the two next regular planning board meetings?
I'm perfectly
And
okay with
and
that.
then that way, we could bring it to.
I was going to suggest, why don't we just have the next scheduled meeting come in earlier for it? Because I don't think we've got
No, but
many.
they're not
much
going to be
for-
here for the next.
That meeting, oh yeah, that's the next meeting.
That's
So
the
we have to have a special meeting. Okay, I missed it. Thank you.
If we have a second, if everybody comes up to, everybody comes up to speed,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have a meeting a month from now, this second, special meeting, then we could tie a bow on this thing.
Agreed.
You want to?
So notice is 2 weeks required? For notice, you need 2 weeks?
Not
For
for
notice,
this.
this is just a legal ad. So, no, not 2 weeks. But I mean, pretty close, right, Jill, as far as getting to the newspaper and having it published?
Just putting an example up there, if we have a meeting on the 17th, we meet the deadline for legal ad publishing.
That's where I was heading. So just get a range of the dates from right now, so be after the 17th and before the next meeting.
I don't know my specific,
Schedule?
myself, at this
I'm
time.
not, I'm here on the 16th.
I think the 16th has
Board, Historic Preservation Board,
Where are you going next?
unless we have the meeting next door,
next one.
unless we have our meeting at 4:27.
What about the week of the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th?
I'm available.
I'm available that week. No problem for me.
Can we go ahead and possibly leave it up to staff to, because they have to take a look if the room is available and what's available and so forth
What were the dates again?
for that week?
Mr. Chairman, where were the dates?
October 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, that week?
So we have a commission meeting October 22nd.
Yes.
So that would not be ideal.
What about the 24th, which is a Thursday?
And the 15th,
on the 24th?
the week before, the 15th, is that available?
And the 23rd is a Wednesday, so 23rd or 24th.
Say that again, please.
23rd is a Wednesday.
I would just like to confirm exactly when I get back. If you guys are looking for me to be here on that.
Yep.
I'm assuming I will on the 23rd, and that's why I did that.
Okay, or if it makes it easier for you, the 24th, it's a Thursday, and we could, and I would suggest that we start at 4, and if it only takes an hour, we get it
Just
done.
a question, for even the following Tuesday, the 29th, to be safe.
Right.
Is that too late?
The 30th is impossible. I have a charter review committee on that day.
Tuesday, 29th is. I put out a text, but I haven't gotten a response on my calendar, unfortunately.
So we can send out some dates, and I guess you can check our calendar and make
Yes.
sure you're available.
Please.
So somewhere around those 2
Yeah,
or 3
and
weeks.
what I would ask is, we're not supposed to do a reply to all, so if everybody, when Jill puts out the dates, if we can just reply to Jill by herself or the sunshine laws, that would work.
Thank you.
Excuse me, so it would be October, to check for October 24th? or,
24th or possibly the 29th.
and for 4 PM, correct?
Not for the 15th?
No, I never said
Oh,
the
okay.
15th.
Okay.
Do we need at 4 PM at that point? I mean, we've had extensive meetings on this. Is there not a reason that we can't meet at 6 o'clock
Okay,
and finish by the 9 o'clock if we had to go that late?
right, that's fine.
I don't think it's going to take very long.
I agree.
Okay, 6 o'clock it is.
Yeah.
When can we get the minutes for this meeting?
About a week from now?
Our turnaround time is 10 to 12 days.
Was this taped?
It's being taped, yes. It's being recorded on Zoom, yes.
So,
So on.
I
you
could send you the
probably-
link tomorrow
Okay,
morning
that's perfect.
Yeah.
That will help.
To Zoom or on,
Again,
is
it's
it on
just a check
YouTube?
against.
as well, yes.
Okay.
I just want to check against my notes, make sure we covered everything.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Excuse me, I didn't have a
Yes.
second on the motion to continue.
That is correct. Who made the motion to continue?
Mr.
Felix.
Pardo.
I'll second it.
We have a second to continue. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody against? No? Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion.
By
Second.
Robert, second by Javier. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
thank you. So you had a great time.